Good evening. I'm Mayor Dean Brookie, and I'd like to welcome you to the June 16th, 2020 City Council regular meeting. Sorry for the delay. We had a little, in our technological experiment with Zoom meetings, we had a little recording issue, and we want to make sure that we do, in fact, record this legally and for posterity. So thank you for that. I'd like to call this meeting to order with a roll call, please.
Councillor Bettine?
Here.
Councillor Noseworthy?
Present.
Councillor Youssef?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter?
Present.
And Mayor...
Here. Thank you very much, Ben. Next item, I'd like to just have council identify any actual or perceived conflicts of interest for any of the items on the agenda this evening. If so, just speak up. Hearing none, we'll move into our first order of business, which is public participation. We'll hear public comments on any specific agenda item during this portion of the meeting. To keep the meeting moving along, we're limiting comments to 3 minutes. You will be muted once you reach that limit, even if you're in the middle of a sentence. Please use the raise hand function if you are using the Zoom app to indicate that you would like to provide a comment. If you're called into the meeting using your telephone, press *9 to raise your hand. At that point, our moderator will announce the next person to speak and will unmute you at that time. Please start by stating your first and last name and your home address for the record. Be advised, this is a live television broadcast. Your video camera will show up when you speak, or if you called in using your telephone, your phone number will be displayed. With that, can we have our first participant?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Mitchell Carter. I'm your moderator this evening. We do have quite a few attendees, but no one has raised their hand yet. If you are here to speak during public participation, please utilize the raise hand function within Zoom. We do have someone here. I'm going to allow Victoria to speak. Victoria, please unmute yourself and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Victoria Schmidt. My address is 1001 East 5th Avenue. There was 2 items I would like to address tonight, and thank you for the opportunity to do so. The first request is that during the course of this meeting, possibly when you get to the end for discussion, would you please address the considerations you've made regarding getting back to public meetings? Council chambers might be a little tight given physical distancing guidelines. Thus, are you considering alternative venues such as the fairgrounds? So please address this during the meeting, what considerations have been discussed so far. Understanding, of course, that they'll continue to evolve and that we're looking at a mid-July public meeting date. The second item is with respect to resiliency of our community in relation to the current virus. We have seen that over the past 3 weekends, there have been protests of 200 to 500 people where there was either a lack of physical distancing or lack of masks. There has not been a rise in COVID cases. We remain at 0 deaths in the city and county and nominal hospitalizations. The objective of shutdown was to ensure hospitals had sufficient capacity. Mercy's capacity has not been taxed. Rather, it has been underutilized with staff being laid off. Fear is now what threatens our community. Fear leading to people not getting treatment, fear of our neighbors, isolation, depression, and increased alcohol and drug abuse. Shutdown kills too. There's increased domestic violence. Children are isolated in homes with abusers. Many of these undoubtedly involve sexual abuse. Children whose stories we will not hear for years, if ever. The impacts of this will last a lifetime. At what point do we start talking about these fallouts? In the past couple of weeks, the state and 9R have started issuing guidelines about the coming school year. 6-year-old kids in masks, no recess, eating lunch, sitting straight forward and not talking to friends. Sports where kids cannot toss or catch balls and need to remain 6 feet apart in groups of 10 with groups separated by 75 yards, nearly a football field length. This for a population, children who are rarely affected by COVID, when alternatively those at risk or those who simply feel they are at risk could create their own conditions of protection. How is it that children are being made to go to the front line? It is time to start working our way out of the hole of fear we are in and start attending to those who have paid the price of keeping us safe. It is time to start recreating a community where people can greet each other out on the trail with a smile, where they can talk over a beer rather than go home and sit alone with a bottle, where kids can play together without feeling they are wrong for doing so. Let's start bringing to the forefront the people who have paid the price for our safety and acting on their behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Do we have another public participant, Mitchell?
Looking back into the list, no one else has raised their hand. If you are here to speak during public participation, please utilize the raise hand function. We do have another one. Hold on a second. I'm going to get an error here. Hold on a second. We have a participant named Katie, and Zoom is telling me that I cannot enable her to speak because she is running an older version of Zoom. So unfortunately, I can't get Katie to speak tonight unless she wants to call in using a telephone. Anybody else here for public participation? We do have another one here. Their Zoom name is Reopen Durango. Hold on a second. Reopen Durango, are you able to speak?
I am.
Okay, please state your full name and your address for the record.
Hi, my name is Shara Johnson. My address is 150 Rock Point Drive, Unit D in Durango.
You have 3 minutes to give your comment.
Oh, I was waiting for the next directive. I guess that's kind of where my head is in the last 3 months. So I have been shut down for 3 months without the ability to make an income. I can't speak as eloquently as Victoria, but from the models I'm seeing and the new science, it shows that the numbers aren't what they thought. The models were wrong. And yet our city is so divided. You guys have pitted business owners against their customers. It's a constant battle. And these are the customers that they need to continue to make a living here. You've created this division where neighbors are against neighbors. It's not the Durango I've been in for 20 years. I voted for every single one of you. I've always been left-leaning, but this particular time in my life, I've decided that what's more important is freedom. And it's sad that I have to make the distinction between freedom and other causes that I would like to be joining. The line has been drawn, and I just don't see a reason for it. There's no reason to subject tourists to this model that you guys are representing or presenting when the numbers just don't show that. Even our own local paper is still citing numbers that have already been disputed by our own governor. So with that being said, I appreciate your time. I trust you guys. I have faith in you guys. And I just hope that you will start representing all of the people in Durango, not just the people that are afraid of the old model. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mitchell, do we have more comment?
I am not seeing anyone else raise their hand. Last call for public participation. If you are here to speak during public participation, please use the raise hand function. We do have another one here. I will allow Molly to talk. Hold on a second. Molly, there you go. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Molly Weiser, and I'm honestly mostly listening in to hear from Chief Brammer, but I thought you should hear from a different perspective. I'm fully on board with wearing a mask in public. Most of the people that I know are fully on board with wearing a mask in public and social distancing as well. I think that the solution for problems like sexual assault on children and so forth is additional funding for social services that are meant to protect children. And I really thank our local leadership for being leaders and for doing epidemiology-informed policy work. And thank you for that. And I hope that that's what you continue to do, balancing all of the interests for the wellness of our community with epidemiology informed decisions. So thank you.
Thank you, Molly. Do we have any other folks, Mitchell?
Last call. Anybody in? Oh, here we go. Someone else. I will allow Julianne to speak.
Hi, my name is Julianne. I just joined because I wasn't able to join earlier because of the technical difficulties that I saw on the Facebook page. But I just wanted to, it sounds like some people are bringing up the mask requirement, and I just wanted to comment that I was in downtown Durango on Friday night, and I walked the entirety of Main Avenue, and there were a lot of people at restaurants out and about, and the majority of people I saw were not wearing masks, and it made me feel very unsafe. And I've decided that I'm just not going to frequent downtown Durango. I do go to a gym that's on Main Avenue, and I go 2 or 3 times a week, but that's about it. Based on what I saw Friday night, I just don't feel like it's safe for me to go to any of the businesses on Main Avenue because most of the people weren't wearing masks, and most people weren't social distancing. And I just don't feel safe. And it's unfortunate because a lot of our local businesses are on Main Avenue, and I do want to support those businesses, but I'm not going to do that unless I feel safe. So I hope you'll take my comments into consideration when you review the mask requirement later in this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Julianne, and all of our participants. If there's no more folks in the queue, we'll move on.
Okay, here we go. Last call. Public participation. If you did call in using your phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. I am not seeing anybody else. So, Mayor Bricky, let's move on.
Thank you, Mitchell. We'll move on to proclamations and presentations.
Well, Dean?
Yes.
Sorry, there were some, I need to make a comment about the public comments that came in via email.
Yes, please.
This evening or this week. So I would like to let the members of council, you already know this, but the members of the public listening and into this meeting, there were 360 emails that came into City Council either via the City Council email address or the public comment email address. And of those 360 emails, there were, it's 301 plus 76. So 377 emails came in. And of those emails, I'm going to start over because I have a whole bunch of things written on this page. 360 emails came into the City Council address, and a total of 17 came into public comment. And of those emails that came in, 301 were in favor of the mask or face covering order to be extended, and 76 of those were against or not in favor of extending the mask or face covering order. I wanted to say that summary information, that's a great deal of public comment and our community voicing their opinion. So that is your statistical information or feedback on emails that were sent in to council.
Thank you, Amber. And I'm aware that I have received personal emails, and I assume that other councilors have had individual emails sent directly to them that might not be in that count as well. But I would say, suggest a similar ratio on the communication I've received personally. Is there any? I'd like for council to be able to deposit any comments that have been received individually to the public record. So we make sure we've got captured a good count of and content of everybody's opinion. With that, I have a slight modification to the schedule here, ranking or not ranking, but ordering our next few items of content. I will read a proclamation regarding our 911 dispatchers. I think after that, if we can have a comment by Bob Bramer, our police chief, that'll start off the public participation or the proclamation at the portion. And then we'll follow Chief Bramer with Mike Murphy, CEO of Mercy, Centura Mercy Hospital. And following that, Leanne Jalan of San Juan Basin Health. That'll group that discussion around the mask ordinance, and then we can move on to our financial discussion with Devin Smith. So following the proclamation here, we'll kick off with Bob Bramer, our police chief for the city of Durango. So I'll read the proclamation. And this is a proclamation for the city of Durango recognizing the role of Durango La Plata 911 dispatchers and their role as first responders. Whereas the city of Durango, facing a worldwide pandemic with COVID-19, understands that there has been an increased demand for services of the 911 dispatchers, 911 dispatchers, and emergency personnel, and whereas the city of Durango recognizes the duties of Durango La Plata emergency 911 dispatchers perform on a daily basis as they are the first in line of defense for the safety of the citizens and emergency personnel who respond to calls. And whereas the United States Congress is attempting to finalize the 911 Saves Act, which would change the name and classification of 911 dispatchers to first responders, and whereas since the 911 Saves Act has not passed Congress at this time, the city wishes to recognize the increased duties of the Durango La Plata County Emergency 911 dispatchers perform and how their work is similar to that of first responders, and whereas Durango La Plata emergency communication dispatchers are trained in emergency medical dispatch, qualifying them to offer a variety of potentially life-saving instructions, including CPR, bleeding control, choking, childbirth, and airway control over the telephone until paramedics arrive on scene. And whereas in 2019 alone, approximately 4,000 calls were initiated for medical and fire emergency services wherein dispatchers provided instructions and guidance. Of those calls, 67 were cardiac arrests, 81 were structure fires, and 1 childbirth occurred while CPR instructions were needed for the infant. And whereas local law enforcement and emergency medical fire agencies in Durango and La Plata County fully support this recognition and acknowledgement of the duties 911 dispatchers perform on a daily basis. Quote, dispatchers are the first responder to any police, fire, or medical call, and without them, the rest of the system would not function, end quote. Chief Bob Bramer, Durango Police Department. Now, therefore, let it be proclaimed that I, Dean Brookie, as mayor of the city of Durango, Colorado, do hereby recognize the duties of the Durango La Plata 911 dispatchers perform on a daily basis as first responders to emergency personnel and their supporting role to the public, police, fire, and medical workers. Dean Brookie, signed Dean Brookie, Mayor. So thank you for that proclamation, and what a great job they do and have done, especially during this coronavirus outbreak. With that, I'd like to introduce Chief Bob Bramer. Chief, can you talk?
Dean, Suzanne, the director of the 911 Communication Center, is here to accept the proclamation.
Excellent, excellent.
So I know it's a little bit odd virtually, but Suzanne is here and I expect that she has a couple of words to say.
I'm so sorry, Suzanne. Yeah, Bob. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to thank you, Mayor Brookie and City Council members, along with each of our law enforcement agencies and the fire agencies that helped to drive this forward. So thank you very much for the recognition.
And thanks for being there for us. Appreciate it. Okay, with that, Police Chief Bob Bramer, can we, I know you've got a few words for the community this evening, and the timing is important, and your message is important to the community as well.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I begin, I just need to make a quick announcement to just clarify a little bit of information in regards to tomorrow's Community Relations Commission meeting. They are hosting a special meeting at 4 o'clock tomorrow. I am not in participation with that meeting. It's a special meeting, and that meeting is supposed to solicit feedback for the upcoming regular meeting, which is scheduled for June 24th at 4 o'clock, and that's a meeting that I will be in attendance of. So I just want to make sure that that's clarified really quickly. Okay, Mitchell Carter is going to go ahead and prompt up my PowerPoint. Thank you, Mitchell. Thank you, Mayor and City Council, for inviting me here this evening to present to our community on behalf of the Durango Police Department. I am Bob Brammer, Chief of Police, City of Durango. I was asked tonight to provide an overview of our police department in the wake of the killing of George Floyd, as well as our acknowledgement of the Black Lives Movement, other racial equity movements, and our efforts for police reform. My hope is this PowerPoint provides a starting point for understanding. I am not ignorant to the fact that the law enforcement profession can do better. We can do better. In order to meet the needs of our diverse community, we must partner together. Instead of waiting until the end of the presentation, if you would like to ask questions or if you would need further clarification, we can do that at the end of each slide. I am slotted for 15 minutes and the topics have been generated from council requests. Please keep in mind these topics could be discussed for hours. Now let us begin. Mitchell, can you go to the next slide, please? In 2017, under the direction of Chief Afsal, we undertook the development of a strategic management plan, as well as rewriting our vision and mission. I'm gonna allow a pause very quickly so everybody has an opportunity to read both our vision and our mission. Input was generated by all members of our organization to reflect who we want to be, as well as how we want to achieve this goal. We feel the values hold true today, and we embed these philosophies in our daily activities, our work products, as well as an evaluation of our overall performance. Additionally, I am currently working with a member of the Community Relations Commission on an equity statement to further enhance our vision. Is there any questions about our vision or our mission? Seeing none, if we can go to the next slide, please.
I have one, Bob, this is Amber. Because we are not able to live stream this and we may have people calling in, I would like to request that you read the information on the slides for those that are listening in, please.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So the vision statement, the Durango Police Department will uphold the Charter of the City of Durango, the laws of Colorado, and the Constitution of the United States. We will serve our diverse community with respect, dignity, integrity, and with the utmost moral and ethical character. We strive to be the premier police department by embracing the highest standards and best practices. We will develop, retain, and invest in the success of our team members. We are committed to reducing crime through innovation and leading-edge technologies. Through community engagement, we will collaborate with our citizens and local partners to address issues and improve quality of life, making Durango the best place to live, work, and play. Our mission, we will serve our community by improving the safety and quality of life through reducing crime and the perception of crime. As mentioned, in 2017, we created our strategic management plan. Originally, it contained 4 strategies. With our reorganization of the department, we condensed these categories to 3. The current strategic categories are community engagement, crime prevention and control, as well as transportation safety, and enhanced infrastructure. We also took a 50-page plan and made it much more manageable by reducing it to 9 pages with action steps which provided clear direction and guidance. And I'm just going to cover tonight the community engagement portion and the enhancing infrastructure portion of it. Some of the action plans on our community engagement are to broaden our efforts to connect with the community, to continue to partner with all community members to address quality of life issues, and to continue to pursue transparency and accountability in the community. As we try to enhance our infrastructure, we invest heavily in human capital development, infrastructure development, and technology development. And each one of these is going to be explained a little bit greater detail in future slides as we continue. Next, please. This is the Citizens Police Academy in an overview. One of the greatest ways that we can enhance our ability to partner with our community is through the Citizens Police Academy. And this also helps with community engagement and transparency. The Citizens Police Academy has been enacted in 1998 with the Durango Police Department. So this year marked the 23rd annual session that we had. Unfortunately, during week 3, that's when the COVID lockdown occurred, and we actually had to stop presenting classes at that point. We're hoping that we're going to be able to re-engage that later this year, but if not, we'll hopefully have some preventative measures where we're going to be able to reconvene that next year. The average class size is 19 people, and we have an alumni association of about 425 members. It's a 12-week program, and each evening we participate in about 3 hours worth of instruction on average. The Academy is designed to increase understanding through education between the citizens and police. And this is the best platform for people to truly understand the functions of our police department.
Chief, can I
Yes.
ask a question on the Citizens Police Academy?
Yes.
How then, once they complete the academy, are they engaged with the police force?
Many times they volunteer with the organization, so they come in and they continue to partner with us. Many of our events we invite them back to. So our public safety awards, we have an association dinner every graduation of every Citizens Police Academy, where all alumni are invited back. And then we leave a little bit of a creativity portion of that to them to be able to say, what can they offer our community? They've helped transport cars back and forth. They've been a big asset in a lot of different ways. And more information can be found out on our website, which is durangogov.org/Citizens Academy.
Thank you.
Yes. For transparency, it's very important that our citizens know how to file a complaint against one of our members. This is the overall policy for the Durango Police Department. And since we can't see it, I'm going to go ahead and read it. The Durango Police Department takes seriously all complaints regarding the service provided by the department and the conduct of its members. The department will accept and address all complaints of misconduct in accordance with this policy and applicable federal, state, and local, municipal, and county rules and the requirements of any collective bargaining agreement. It is also the policy of this department to ensure that the community can report misconduct without concern for reprisal or retaliation. Now, I want to cover the process really quick of how we actually receive these complaints. So the source of complaints comes in multiple different ways. Individuals from the public may make complaints in any form, including in writing, by email, in person, or by telephone. Anonymous and third-party complaints will be accepted and investigated to the extent that sufficient information is provided. Department members becoming aware of alleged misconduct shall also immediately report this information in a complaint format to a supervisor. Once the complaint is actually received, what we do then is we actually start to investigate it. And the first part of the investigation is the classification of that complaint. And we have 3 classifications. 1 is informal, 2 is formal, and the 3rd is incomplete. So the informal complaint is usually worked between a shift supervisor and the complainant to see exactly what actions need to be taken or are desired by the complainant. If they feel satisfied that that complaint can be handled at the supervisory level, then it's reported 1 level up in the chain of command, and then we're able to disposition that after we complete a written documentation of that incident. A formal complaint is going to be a matter which a supervisor determines that further action is warranted. These are going to be more serious in nature. They're going to have a higher level of investigation that's going to be needed. In many cases, these are going to be assigned or referred to our internal affairs unit, and we'll take an investigation through that person. Now, it needs to be also told that the Durango Police Department has a full-time sergeant that all he does is investigate complaints as they come in. His secondary job is to make sure that we're in compliance with our policy and our policies are up to date and they're good to go. And the last form of a complaint classification is incomplete. And this is a matter in which the complaining party either refuses to cooperate or becomes unavailable after diligent follow-up to the investigation. We'll then take a look at the information that was initially provided to us and see if we can move forward with the investigation on our own if we have enough information to process the investigation from there. Once investigated, all complaints are documented. All complaints will have an internal number that's assigned to them. And then we'll assign a disposition to each one of those complaints. We have 4 dispositions: unfounded, exonerated, not sustained, and sustained. And those are all based on the conclusions of the investigation and how much evidence we have to be able to look into that to validate them or not. And then at the end, the recommendations come through the chain of command in regards of if there's going to be discipline on a sustained complaint. We have multiple levels of discipline that are in compliance with our HR department. Some of those disciplinary actions could be training, some could be counseling, some could be a verbal reprimand, a written reprimand, loss of leave, suspension without pay, a punitive transfer, demotion, reduction in pay, or termination as the worst case scenario. I've got some more information to provide on this, but that was a lot. Do I have any questions to this point?
Chief, I do have on the next one, just as you're speaking about the Citizen Complaint Review Panel, could you explain how those members are appointed and how often they meet? And then could you address the diversity composition of that panel?
Yes, absolutely. So I was going to cover the House Bill 19-1119 just prior to that, so my order's a little bit out on my slide because this is very important to understand because this took effect in April 12th of 2019, and this was a House bill that allowed people to have access to our internal affairs records after the effective date, which was put into play. And there's some criteria that goes along with that. So upon completion of an investigation of an in-uniform or on-duty incident or conduct, based off of a person requesting an open records request, they do have the ability to view some IA files. But again, it has to be an in-uniform, on-duty incident or conduct that is related to a specific or identifiable incident to the public. So it's not going to be an employee-employee issue. It's not going to be a personal issue or an off-duty issue or any of those type of things. So it has to be an on-duty related to the public type issue. And then from there, we provide first a summary letter of the details of in regards to what the complaint was with all the details into there. And if that does not satisfy the open records request at that time, we can then provide inspection of that record with certain redactions in place to ensure the confidentiality and certain components of that are provided as well. So Councilor Noseworthy, to get to your next point. The Citizen Complaint Review Panel, or CCRP. The purpose of this review is to review all citizen complaints to ensure that they are properly investigated, classified, and dispositioned correctly. Since becoming chief, we have reinstituted this panel and we have reviewed complaints from 2018 and 2019. In 2019, the CCRP was comprised of 3 females and 2 males. 2 were academic professionals from a local institution. 1 was a director of a local nonprofit. 1 was an HR director from a local corporation. And 1 was a city staff member selected by the city manager's office. In 2020, we have plans to increase the panel by 2 more members and also to increase the diversity of the group. The selection process is dictated by an SOP that we have written, and it's outlined through our standards of conduct policy. Does that cover everything that you wanted me to cover? Okay, outstanding. Is there any other questions in regards to our citizen complaint process?
Chief, you're doing great, and thanks for your candidness. If you could just speak into the speaker just a little bit closer so we can hear every aspect of what you're saying here.
I apologize, Mayor. I'll try to do better on that one. Next slide, please. There's been a lot of questions regarding our training. Colorado Post, which is a peace officer and standardization training, they've established rules, and Rule 28 is one that pertains to peace officer certifications and trainings. So the state requirements are that we have to have 24 hours minimum of training hours annually. 12 of those hours must be perishable skills. And perishable skills are defined by driving, arrest control, and firearms. Another additional mandate as it pertains to the incidents that are occurring globally right now or within our nation is every 5 years outside of the academy, we have to have 2 hours of refresher training, anti-bias or cultural awareness training. We've been working with the CRC, the Community Relations Commission, since late last fall and into the beginning of this year until the COVID lockdown to address this issue, because we feel that this was willfully inadequate based off of the dynamics that are occurring across our country. And I'll touch on that a little bit more as far as what we've instilled with that. But we were working with the CRC at that point on the city level as well with HR and the core team to try to develop additional trainings that we could have for all of our employees, not just the police department. The 2019 training hour breakdown for us was we had 3,717 hours of training last year, and that averages out to about 75 hours of training per officer. So that's 3 times what the state minimum mandate is. In our perishable skills area, we have 1,498 hours of training, which averages about 30 hours of training, which is pretty close to 3 times the amount of training that the state requires. In 2015 to 2019, we required 158 hours of anti-bias training and cultural awareness for the department over that period. In 2020, until the date of June 15th, the department has accumulated 362 hours of training for anti-bias cultural awareness training, and so that equates out to about 7 hours per training. So we've basically tripled the amount of training that's required by the state in a 6-month period, which the state requires over a 5-year period. So I'm pretty impressed with our efforts in that area, and a lot of that was attributed to the efforts of the CRC to ensure that we were on pace with that. Next slide, please.
And Chief, can I ask another question? Sorry.
Yes, Counselor.
I was curious on that training, if you bring someone, who you're bringing in for training for the officers and where it is conducted.
Well, currently this year, the training that we used was on Police Academy 1, and that's it's a subset of our CERSA training. So all this was online training for this time. So there was multiple ones that covered a multitude of different components that were related to anti-bias and cultural awareness. So at this point, they were all video trainings. We were working on some live presentation trainings with the CRC. I believe the core team was just recently provided this initiative. So they too will be looking at this to ensure that we have some in-person, face-to-face training at some point.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely. Body cameras. This has been a huge topic of discussion over the last several weeks. So we implemented the actual wearing of body cameras in 2018. Previous to that, historically, we've had car cameras in our police cars since 2006. We've also had cameras attached to our tasers since about 2007 when we implemented those devices. We no longer have the taser cameras attached to our tasers, but we still have body cameras and we still have car cameras. And this is just a snippet from our policy. But prior to going into service, each uniformed member will be responsible for making sure that he or she is equipped with a portable recorder issued by the department, and that recorder is in good working order. If the recorder is not in good working order, or the member becomes aware of a malfunction at any time, the member shall promptly report the failure to his or her supervisor and obtain a functioning device as soon as reasonable practical. Uniformed members should wear the recorder in a conspicuous manner, or otherwise notify persons that they are being recorded whenever reasonably practical. So we do, on every citizen encounter, on every law enforcement function that we do, require that our officers activate their cameras. And with the new legislation that's coming down from the state that we expect to be signed any day, there'll be additional parameters on here that we're gonna have to update our policies with as well.
Another question on this, I don't want to get too into specifics, but I recall when we approved this, it was when I was new on council, and it was a substantial investment. Do you recall the investment amount?
I do not. I can get that information for you for follow-up, but it is expensive.
It was expensive.
Yes, it was very expensive. And a lot of what the expense is the storage of all the data that comes along with it. The equipment itself, it is expensive as well. We do have to buy more cameras because we couldn't afford for everybody. So we have a couple pool cameras and we're using those. But right now, I currently am not issued a camera for myself. Detectives are not. So anytime we go out and we interact in a law enforcement function, we have to check out a pool camera. So hopefully there'll be a budget consideration moving forward.
Correct. Yes. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so police use of force reform. After Ferguson and other high-profile events which occurred around 2014 and 2015, many studies continued to identify best practices and offered recommendations on how policing practices could promote effective crime reduction while still building public trust. These studies were done through advocacy groups, presidential task force, and independent police research groups. I have listed several of the more influential publications for discussion. The first I would like to talk about is Campaign Zero, which was published in September of 2016. Campaign Zero studied 100 of the largest police departments in the United States. It identified the concept of 8 can't wait, which I will cover in the next set of slides as it relates to the Durango Police Department. The next initiative was a 21st Century Policing Guide, which was a result of the task force ordered by President Obama to examine police practices with the intent of police reform. This guide is still considered a blueprint for change and legitimacy. We discuss it regularly during our supervisor meetings and as part of our curriculums at all major executive policing institutions at the FBI and Northwestern. It is comprised of 6 pillars, 59 recommendations, and 92 action steps. The 6 pillars are building trust and legitimacy, policy and oversight, technology and social media, community policing and crime reduction, training and education, and officer wellness and safety. I also have the recommendations if you would like me to share those examples as well. Okay. The PERF report, Guiding Principles of Use of Force, was published in March of 2016. Ultimately, this report was about the sanctity of all human life. The 30 guiding principles was intended to refocus the core idea that the preservation of life has always been at the heart of American policing. The report was centered around 2 types of police encounters. One was subjects who have mental illness, developmental disabilities, autism, drug addiction, or other conditions which can cause them to behave erratically or threatening. And 2 was subjects who are either armed with a knife or other object which is not a gun. And I can provide a list of what those 30 guiding principles are as well. And this can always be done at a later time, and I can direct you to the studies as well. The other study I have listed is also from PERF, and PERF stands for Police Executive Research Forum. It was established in August of 2012, and it was a fantastic publication on how to de-escalate situations and how to minimize the use of force incidents. Some of the greatest takeaways from this document were, 1, how to slow situations down. When we're able to slow situations down, we're able to have a better understanding of what that situation is. Many times when police officers respond to a scene, they don't understand all the information that's there at the time because those people are already involved in it. We're playing catch up. We're relying from a lot of information from our dispatch center, as well as information as we're responding to the situation and from the initial setup when we first get there. But we need to slow situations down. And that was one of the greatest takeaways from here. Next, number 2, is to get a supervisor on scene. We implemented some command and control guidelines within the last 3 years. And these are great. Basically, it's a mini ICS that allows supervisor to get on scene. We use this anytime that there is a weapon involved, there's a disturbance involved, it's a multi-agency response, or we've got multiple officers arriving on scene. And the whole purpose of this is to isolate the situation, contain the situation, and communicate that situation. And with the supervisor on scene, they can take charge of that and they can direct those actions while the officers are tasked with doing their job, which is to de-escalate that situation, hopefully into a peaceful resolution. The next is CIT training and teams. Currently at the Durango Police Department, we have 29 certified officers. Currently, we have 49 officers that are employed with the Durango Police Department. But 29 of those, over half of us, have been through CIT training. We also recently, over the last year, have partnered with Axis Mental Health, and they've developed response teams. So during normal business hours, they have some of their employees that can respond to any one of our situations, or we can respond with them if we know that there's a mental health crisis going on. After hours, they are also available, and they're just one phone call away through dispatch, and they have an on-call team that can also respond. Another very important aspect of CIT training we've incorporated over the years is we're starting to mix our tactics along with CIT so that we can, again, slow the situation down and use good police tactics so the encounters aren't being forced. The number 4 is identifying chronic consumers. Now, there's a lot of people in our community that use a lot of services, and they are what we consider frequent flyers, not only for us, but for the fire department and for the ER and for detox. We've partnered with Mercy to assist identifying who those people are so that we can properly provide them with services as needed. And I know there's been a ton of success stories out there where they've been able to divert those people out and put them into treatment, put them in job court and other areas, and now we don't have to deal with them on a consistent basis like we had in the past. Another component to chronic consumers is some of the programs that the district attorney's office continues to implement. They have behavioral court, which is drug court, and they also have mental health court. Each one of those are different options to not criminalize either addiction or mental health issues. The district attorney has been great with that. We've been using those diversion programs for several years. And that's actually, as part of the restorative justice programs, becoming more and more popular. And it's been a greater option since we've had to reduce the jail populations as well. Unfortunately, they're losing funding from the state for the mental health diversion, which is going to impact us severely in the future. Another great initiative is train on tactics and verbal skills to avoid over-reliance on weapons and tasers. We want to rely on our officers' skills of being able to talk to people and de-escalate them and not have reliance on the equipment that we carry. We also train on recognizing real threats and not misperceiving conditions. And there's some examples of that. There's certain mental disabilities that are out there, and some of them are, for example, like autism, where there's certain signs that people are exhibiting that look like somebody's in a state of aggression or crisis when they're really not. And we need to be able to recognize that so we can de-escalate that or call for support and help us to work through each one of those scenarios once we're on scene. Number 7 is training tactical disengagement. This is a big one because not all calls that we go on are criminal. And not all calls are going to result or need to result in an arrest or a citation. If we can identify a person and we can de-escalate that situation without forcing a bad situation, then we're going to do that. And this is not something that's been taught in years past. So it was always the police show up and somebody's probably going to go away in handcuffs. So disengagement is a huge philosophical and cultural change that's been being implemented, and we do this quite a bit, and we talk about it all the time in our different trainings. Number 8 is training and understanding the use of force options and not continuums. Continuums has been a big topic. It's been talked about lately with use of force continuums. Continuums is an older philosophy, and it's very rigid. And the way it works is it was taught, like if you think about a ladder, and it starts off with, officer presence, and then it goes to officer verbal commands, and it moves all the way up to deadly force. Well, with a continuum, you have to go through each level, both up and down, to escalate and to de-escalate as you're reacting to another continuum, which is what the suspect is doing and how they're acting and how they're responding to you. So what we use and we train are use of force options. So what that is we're able to either quickly react to a suspect's or an individual's actions, and then we can de-escalate that just as quickly, if not quicker, based off the totality of that situation. So understanding what those options available to us are very good. And the last one is avoiding the concept of lawful but awful. This is what you're seeing in legislation right now where they're talking about qualified immunity. In the past, certain actions by police officers were lawful, but they were horrible to see, and the community just didn't understand what it was. The best example I can provide in this situation is if a family member is in extreme crisis based off of a mental health or a drug overdose or some other kind of an issue, and the family members call us to respond, we respond, and all of a sudden that person is agitated, they're aggressive, they may even potentially have a weapon. Under the use of force guidelines, if they threaten us or they threaten another member, we can probably use deadly force in that situation. We don't want to be in that situation because we're there to help. The family members called us there to help. So just because we're legitimate doesn't mean that we're right. So the little phrase that we use is it's not always about what you can do, but it's about what you should do. And that's a concept that we try to train across the board. Are there any questions in regards to our reform aspects in the documents that we're using? Okay, next slide, please. These are the 8 can't wait initiatives. And I would just like to reiterate real quickly that Campaign Zero identified these and they released these in September of 2016. Durango Police Department did not wait for the 8 can't wait. We have continually worked to implement and improve these initiatives since 2015, 2016, up till present day. And this process continues every single day. So the first of the 8 can't wait initiatives is require officers to de-escalate situations when possible before using force. De-escalation is a guiding principle in law enforcement. The concept is reiterated at every opportunity, and it is taught in all use of force classes. And it is covered in all previous slides, as well as our policy under crisis intervention. The next initiative is the use of force continuum or matrix that define or limit the types of force or weapons that can be used to respond to specific types of resistance. Again, I talked a little bit about this here just a second ago, but the Durango Police Department prescribes to the COGA method of arrest and control. Under this discipline, we instruct and we practice use of force options. This allows the officer to respond and de-escalate by applying the appropriate level of force based on changing factors. And I've already kind of given some of the examples, but the old continuum used to say that if a suspect or a subject has weapon X, then the officer will respond with weapon Y. So use of force options broadens that out and allows us to be much more responsive to the need of that type of a call. The next initiative is restrict chokeholds and strangleholds, including carotid restraints, to situations where deadly force is authorized or prohibiting them altogether. Chokeholds have never been taught and or covered under our use of force policy. And they're only covered in our use of force policy and only authorized under deadly force encounters. The carotid control hold was removed from our training curriculum years ago and is only authorized in lethal or deadly force encounters. The next initiative, require officers to give verbal warnings when possible before using deadly force. We teach, instruct, and practice verbal warnings prior to many applications of force to include prior to firing our weapons if applicable. However, there are those times when a verbal warning would cause such a delay that officers or others' lives could or further be jeopardized and is not applicable. And a couple of those situations that I would like to talk about, just examples are an ambush situation or an active shooter situation are the 2 most prominent ones where we would not be able to provide a verbal warning as we apply force in that situation. Next slide, please. The 5th initiative is to prohibit officers from shooting at people in moving vehicles unless the person poses a deadly threat by means other than the vehicle, for example, shooting at people from the vehicle. This is covered in 2 areas of our policy, both in our use of force section and in our pursuit policy. Now, please keep in mind that our world has changed since these recommendations have written. Events such as Paris and New York have witnessed atrocities committed by vehicle-borne threats. This is why our policy is written in such a way. We've also seen the fact where we have to shoot at vehicles at times, and I want to cite the San Bernardino incident where there was an active shooter that was terrorizing the entire area, and those officers had to take that type of action in order to stop that threat to protect that community. The next initiative requires officers to exhaust all other reasonable alternatives before resorting to deadly force. We will do everything we can to avoid deadly force encounter, and this topic is covered under our use of force policy. As mentioned a couple of slides ago, the sanctity of human life is our highest concern. We would attempt to use time, tactics, and other measures. We would only use deadly force as a reaction to the decision or actions of a subject we are dealing with its weight to the safety and to the threat of the community and to our officers. To require officers to intervene to stop another from using excessive force. This is covered in our use of force policy, our standards of conduct policy, and by state statute. So we have a duty to intercede. Any officer present or observing another officer using force that is clearly beyond which is objectively reasonable under the circumstances shall, when in a position to do so, intercede to prevent the use of unreasonable force. An officer who observes another employee's use of force that exceeds the degree of force permitting by law will promptly report these observations to a supervisor. And these will be reported. And this is not only our policy, but it's also state statute. And failure to report or failure to intercede is a class, or failure to report as of now is a class 1 misdemeanor. And under the new legislation that again is going to be signed any day, failure to intercede will also be a criminal act as well on top of this. And the last initiative was to require comprehensive reporting that includes both uses of force and threats of force. For example, reporting instances where an officer threatens a civilian with a firearm. Reporting the use of force is covered in 2 areas and is addressed under multiple policies. The first is in a crime or incident report. We always write those in these situations. The second is an internal use of show of force reporting form, which tracks all aspects of the incident to include circumstances, type of force or weapon used by both the subject and the officer, any injuries, as well as a witness or any other officers on scene. Each incident is carefully reviewed through the entire chain of command, starting with the direct supervisor. Additionally, the lead instructor for each one of those disciplines will review each incident, and a board can be convened if necessary. Annually, a review is conducted to ensure policy compliance and any needs within our training.
Bob, I'm really sorry to do this to you, but we have, I'm wondering how many slides are left because we have 2 members on here that are waiting and they've been on Zoom since 8 a.m. without breaks, and they thought they were on at 6:30, which we had.
Yeah, I can blow through this next couple. Really
and then
quick.
I have one other notification for council. We are now live streaming. The technical difficulties have been solved, so we're back up on normal system. Thank you.
And can I just add, could we all hold our questions for Bob until after the other folks have a chance to speak if they're still with us?
Okay, and then the next slide is, it was asked if we could just describe what our types of officers are. This is something I can cover later down the road. Our next slide is our hiring process and our standards and our criteria. Again, I can cover this at a later date. And then slide 12, this is just a professional organizations that we belong to that ensure compliance with best practice. So I hope both council and our community found this presentation informative. I would also hope it provides a foundation to work from. We are not perfect at the Durango Police Department, but we have very dedicated and caring people who are committed to serve with honor and respect, to uphold our oaths and protect, serve, and care for every member of our community. And if we want to hold questions to the end, or if I need to come back at a later time, I can certainly do that.
Bob, if you wouldn't mind just staying on after we have the next 2 presentations, we can follow up and finish yours up. That would be great because you
absolutely,
put
Amber.
time
No
into
problem.
It's great information. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, and sorry to cut you short there in any way whatsoever. That's one of the most important national topics we can, and I think that demonstrates we are certainly on a bright path in the city of Durango, and have been. With that, I'd like to introduce, we'll move to item 5.2, which is Mike Murphy, CEO and interim CEO of Mercy Centura Hospital, that has some statistics about the COVID-19 virus.
I just heard that Mike's having a hard time getting back on with us. I don't know if we can look out there in space and see if he can be reintroduced to the panel.
We can do that, or we can move on to Leanne and followed by Bob.
It looks like Mr. Murphy is back with us now.
Excellent.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can, Bob.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that I can bring up the discussion tonight. So thank you, everybody, for having me join you tonight. I am finding there's a little bit of technical difficulty, so once in a while we may get a flash on the screen that I have to click out of, but otherwise we should be able to walk through this. So does everybody see the projection right now on COVID projections? Hello? Can anybody hear me?
Yes, it looks great.
Okay, great. All right, so what I thought would be helpful to do tonight is to just quickly run through a couple of key areas. This should probably take about 10 minutes to walk through. I want to just give you a sense of what we look at when we look at the overall information some of the population risk factors that we bring into, what is the type of individual who lives in our area, and what are the risks that they have coming into a pandemic like this. Obviously, the impact of some of the effectiveness of the restrictions that have on our hospital system. So, and then finally, just some key considerations for if relaxing the restrictions, things to be thinking about as we go through that. So as I go through here, I think this is important just to set the stage that Mercy focuses on first identifying what is the level of risk that's in our community. And as you can see from this slide, it basically tells you the areas that are the green are the lowest risk. So fortunately for us, the population that lives in this area does not have a lot of comorbidities, a lot of other health conditions that put us into a high risk category. But I'll call your attention down to this bottom right-hand corner, which is actually going into New Mexico. And that New Mexico area does have a lot of individuals who do have high risks, multiple issues like diabetes, heart disease, pulmonary disease, that they're dealing with before there's a pandemic. And the reason we're concerned about that is they are more susceptible to needing healthcare services. And so we have been studying what's been going on in those areas. Fortunately, we do have in Farmington, San Juan Regional Medical Center, which does bring a very good set of skills and capacity to handle this, but also there are hospitals as well in Santa Fe and Los Alamos. However, when we start looking at the density of those folks down in that Santa Fe area, in that New Mexico area, the density is so strong and dense that it does create an additional issue that is how the disease tends to spread, is that high density area. So the concern obviously is, will those folks have to leave that market and come to Durango for those services? In addition, it also, with that risk, puts a higher risk of people who are coming to vacation in this area and what that might actually mean in terms of impact. When we step out, then we've also been studying what's going on in the Navajo Nation, the density, particularly density factor there of the 510,000 people who live not only in New Mexico, but in Arizona. So we've kind of pulled in our region. What's the look we're seeing that we need to be concerned about? When we look at where we started in Colorado, we were 20th in the country 15th in the country, 15th highest. We've moved back the direction we want to go, which means we're in the 20th. Best performers of it, or lowest risk, I will call at this point in terms of confirmed cases. So we're doing a great job there. When you look at the interventions that slowed this down as we projected them and went through from March 13, when we started out with ski closures, and then measured every 14 days the impact of that, we were able to project what we thought was actually going to happen and what we actually experienced. And to earlier comments this evening, the future as well. When we look at the degree of testing, though, at the same time in the last really 6 weeks, we've been able to significantly increase our testing here in Southwest Colorado. And so how does that stack up against the other regions? As we've looked at the level of testing, you can see the other communities that are within Colorado, but also if you look at New Mexico, they were about 5 times more testing than we have, and now we're starting to catch up to them, if you will. We're about 2.5 times less than they are. When we look at then how Colorado overall has flattened, you see we're at 29,130 cases as of June 14th, but we are flattening that case. This kind of depicts for you specifically how it looks in terms of new confirmed cases per day in Colorado. So in the last 7 days, 161 statewide is our average. So as you can see, the previous week, we were at 234. So we're doing a great job of continuing to flatten that curve. Southwest Colorado continues to increase. We're up to 190 cases in that Southwest Colorado area. This is not just La Plata County, but it is the region around the Four Corners of that are Colorado specific that we are tracking, because these are our draw areas for the hospital, that if there is a need for an inpatient admission, an ICU bed, a vent, we're probably the destination they're going to seek. So that's why we go out a little bit broader. But when we look at the flattening of the curve, Southwest Colorado continues to flatten that. We're averaging about 0.85 new cases per day in the last 7 days, and again, continuing to flatten that. It's obviously even lower in La Plata County, and I'm sure Leanne will speak to that as well. However, what we try to track as Mercy is to really keep an eye on the ICU admissions. We started out in the green of saying, gosh, it's really taking off. We think we're going to have a lot of admissions. We were able to bring the curve down. We then recasted those projections and we continue to monitor those. And we're over in the blue section now where we have been able to, what that line represents, project the number of ICU beds that are actually average daily census of patients that are in the hospital specific to COVID. So our capacity, if we needed to surge, is up to 23 beds. We're more at the 1 to 2 bed utilization as we speak. When we look at ventilator utilization at the same time, these are actually the same projections as we looked across. And as you can see here, really 1 to 2 to 3. So as a result of that, we have the capacity to go up to 40 vents, but we're not anywhere near that at this time. So let's look at San Juan County quickly. San Juan County, New Mexico, particularly the whole Northwest New Mexico area is flattening their cases as well. They're over 2,000. They have effectively been able to bring their cases down. They are still growing in comparison at 18 new cases per day over the last 7 days as opposed to our 0.85 cases. So they're doing a great job. We also are obviously tracking the Navajo Nation and to see how they're doing. The Navajo Nation has slightly in the last week been able to actually flatten their curve as well. They're at about 161 cases per day. So it gives you a sense that we have been able to successfully flatten that curve and be the beneficiaries of that. What we tend to do is look out at where other states are and other parts of the country are and what they're experiencing as they've started to loosen their restrictions. And I think this is a good example of where if you look at the state of Washington and their progression, they're approximately 2 weeks ahead of Colorado. And as you look at the side by side, they look very similar in terms of the growth, the spiking, and then the coming back down. With the exception of if as I pull over just in the last, since they are 2 weeks ahead of us, they have actually now seen a rebound in the number of cases as they have relaxed their restrictions. They are clearly seeing an increase. Will this continue? We continue to monitor this very closely, but it is concerning that we look at Washington and the tracking that we are doing in relation to them. One other area is Arizona's. They have increased their mobility. Their restrictions have been lessened really in mid-May as we have tracked what those originally were in the dark green here. The lighter green being what we've actually seen in terms of the number of initiatives to relax restrictions. And as you look at mid-May, when they made those changes, 14 days later is where the green bar is. This is the effect of the change that's happened. They are now seeing in excess of 1,800 to 2,000 cases per day. So they are rampantly increasing. The state did issue an issue to all hospitals to go into surge planning to a high degree of ramp up, and they are running into capacity challenges. The data that we continue to track to try to learn from other states that have opened up their restrictions prior to our decision. We continue, though, we have what's called the Mercy COVID tracker. We continue to track what our current level of risk is today. The good news is we have a low risk. We continue to project these out and through this statistical analysis to make sure that we don't have a capacity challenge if we did see a surge. And today we have a fairly low risk facing us. So in summary, statewide, we continue to see a reduction in rate of growth. Overall testing continues to increase, which is a great thing. Thank you, San Juan Basin and Leanne and all of her team in terms of really pushing this forward. She's done a phenomenal job for our community. No increase in hospital resources have been needed to date. We, in Southwest Colorado, Mercy has opened all its testing, all its care. The hospital is very safe. People are coming in to get their emergency care as well as their surgeries. We are back up at close to 100% of where our normal operating level is. Southwest Colorado, though, is continuing to see decreasing daily cases. Even though we are increasing our testing rates, New Mexico effectively has flattened the curve. The Navajo Nation is slightly flattening it, and hopefully that will continue. And I think this is the key point as we continue to look is the current interventions have been effective in reducing our rate of growth. And that's what the data is telling us as we look to making sure that we are ready, able to provide the care to our community when it's needed, if it's needed. The social distancing, the masks, and the hygiene have been effective drivers in this reduction. The states who have been more aggressive on relaxing their restrictions are showing signs of increased COVID cases. I gave you 2 examples tonight. There are others, but I showed those just for probably the most closest to us, if you will. We continue to monitor this on a weekly basis and meet with the San Juan Basin Health Department and Leanne and her team, as well as many other individuals that are in the medical community, track this data, look at what's going on, and try to be ready to be there if the care is needed. So with that, I'll stop sharing and open the floor to folks for questions.
I have a question, Mike. First of all, thank you. That was really helpful, and especially the overlay with the state of Washington and what's doing with that. I just wanted to clarify on the slide that you showed that said that we were 20th. Is that on a per capita basis, or is that only on total confirmed cases? Because those would be 2 very different positions, possibly.
Great question. This is on just total confirmed cases. It's not on a per capita basis.
So if we did it on a per capita basis, because we have such a low population, we actually might be higher up.
Yeah, most likely would be, right. And New York's a good example of that.
So we could be 10 or something.
Correct.
Or 15.
Yeah, it's good point.
Mike, I just wanted to confirm some of the information. I think I heard you say that you have 23 beds total available at Mercy, and 1 to 2 are currently being utilized by COVID patients?
So we have right now in our ICU 23 ICU bed capacity, and we averaged about 1 to 2 patients in that that are related to COVID as we've been through this process. So one of the things we're finding is obviously new and effective ways to treat this. We have not seen the level of patient admissions for COVID that we had anticipated early on. As a result of that, both our ICU and our ventilator concerns have not been challenged because of that. But that's primarily driven because we've been so effective on the front end of reducing the risk and reducing the exposure and keeping ourselves from having those number of cases hitting us. That's, up the street, we've had San Juan Regional Medical Center, where we have helped provide protective equipment, PPEs. We've been providing ventilators to them. They had a huge surge. They did not have the level of restrictions early as La Plata County did. And so there was a huge surge, and we were working and actually supporting them. They have now obviously implemented many of those, and you can see their numbers come down. So
I just want to say thank you very much for providing that region, our local level information, as well as regional and a more broader view, because I know there's a lot of residents who are concerned about we're a little different than some of the other areas of the nation, and it's really nice to know what's really happening here. So thank you very much.
You bet. The one area I would probably add in addition to that is in terms of patients coming in and receiving care and going through surgeries, we have a pretty strict process we put in place that requires folks to be quarantined before their surgery, and then they get COVID tested before their surgery. ability to keep people safe as they're going through surgeries has also been a major focus for the hospital. So
When we see that there have been 11 hospitalizations, when we look at the dashboard for San Juan Basin Public Health, is that total admissions to the hospital here in town, or is that just at any given point in time? Or can you give us a sense of, in the region, how many people with COVID have been hospitalized? If it's different from the 11 or 12 that's reported by San Juan Basin.
So I would have to, we provide that data to the state and to San Juan Basin. I'm not sure what numbers they're reporting specifically. Leanne might be helpful in terms of what we provided, because we provide a lot, and what that's actually reflecting. If it's total patients that have been admitted, or I think it may be, but I'm not sure.
Our epidemiologist was on the phone. I believe that she had to go, but I believe that the answer that we have that is, oh, crapola.
She's back, Leanne.
Oh, okay.
I can help on this question. Our dashboard only shows you the hospitalizations in the cases of residents who live in La Plata and Archuleta County. So Mercy, they see patients from all over, not necessarily just La Plata and Archuleta County. So the 11 only and that's a cumulative count for La Plata and Archuleta County residents. It's not like a snapshot in time.
So my point being that people from outside of this immediate area are coming in and going to the hospital from some of those denser areas.
No, absolutely. And so when people, there's this sort of issue, which is people can live in one community, seek medical care in another community, they can get tested in a third community, they could work in a fourth community. And so when you're tracking data from community to community and trying to comp all of it, it is never as clean as people would like it to be, because nobody stays in one jurisdiction. So we have COVID patients that enter our data that live in Montezuma County, that live in New Mexico, that get investigated, and we're all kind of grabbing all of it and then trying to unpack it and get everything counted once in just the jurisdiction it belongs in the end. But it is an ongoing discussion amongst many jurisdictions.
Mike, this is Dean Brookie. Do you have, we had looked at some curves projecting into July in anticipation of the a rebound caused by reopening of certain, a logical reopening. And I didn't see any of the projections on that in your presentation tonight, but I don't know if you can speak to that or
well, I really, I mean, I'll put that more in the space of the health department in terms of projections. We've been, really tracking historical and then watching others historical and what behaviors they exhibited as they've made those changes and what the effect of those in to try to track. And when we've tried to look at what's the effect of that. So, I mean, the good news is the current decisions that have been made have been very wise and appropriate, and as a result, have led to our low numbers. That's been very clear. And so, unfortunately, the ability for that really falls into the State's Department's expertise of saying, well, if you have this compliance and people do this, here's what you may see. I'm more of the sort of following that and saying, okay, did it change? Get ready. So I'll look to Leanne to bring us that wisdom, if you will.
Thank you. Thanks for good work, and thanks for being an asset to our community. And
pleasure.
Reopening, yeah. With that, Leanne, perhaps, it's perfect intro to you. Okay, I can introduce Leanne Jalan, is the Executive Director of San Juan Basin Health Department.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Oh, wait, I'm on the wrong slide. How about that one? All right. Thank you, Mayor Brookie. So First of all, I just want to thank the mayor and the council for all of the efforts in this community to educate the community and work together with all of us to slow the spread. And I appreciate the work that Centura is providing to the local communities and local jurisdictions with data to inform decision making. It has been an incredible help to have local data and then Four Corners regional data. We in the public health community in the state of Colorado are relying on statewide models and have not had really good access to drilled in local data. And then I think we just talked a little bit about why with especially small numbers, it's really hard to unpack all of the data and tease out exactly what's happening in each specific community. The state, with encouragement and support from local public health, is working really hard on a drilled down data source to expand to the rest of Colorado so that other local jurisdictions can look at what we've been looking at in this partnership with Centura to make decisions. So we appreciate that. We think more of that will be coming. But in the meantime, we mostly from the state of Colorado get statewide numbers. So with our local data, which is what we track based on the cases that we investigate here, we feel like we are very fortunate to live in a community that has worked very hard to understand the risks of COVID-19 and have put in the appropriate measures of social distancing, hygiene, sanitation, wearing face coverings, and considerable efforts to minimize spread. We also understand that all of these efforts together, and especially the ones that took huge economic and educational and social tolls, are extremely challenging for all of us. They're challenging, economically, emotionally, physically, mentally. We are as committed as anybody else as getting back to a version of normal as quickly as we can and as safely as we can. So that is the context in which we are looking at the data and trying to figure out what the right things for the community are. This is just a quick summary of what San Juan Basin Public Health's role is in emergency response. We've talked about this before. This gives examples of how we're containing disease, supporting healthcare, sharing information, working with businesses on mitigation so that as businesses reopen, they are able to do it safely, have the resources, can train staff, and can be successful in that. And then, as we've talked about, advocating for resources for the region, including accessibility of data through this region. And then just to be clear, as a local public health department, our staff has been tracking this disease since January of this year. And was tabletop exercising with community partners. In February, we went into emergency response the first week in March 2nd. So the data that we've talked about here is locally, La Plata County, we have 85 cases. So these are lab confirmed or epi-linked cases that meet a case definition. We believe that, so I guess the other thing that I always want to say in any COVID presentation is anything that we talk about in COVID-19 has to be in the context of this is a novel coronavirus, or that, that's the way it is described in the public health community. So novel meaning it is new. So all of the information that we have on it begins with studies in the U.S. starting in January of this year. So that's, well, the U.S. information on it. So again, we're still only, I can't remember, I feel like when I started having these presentations, we were 3 months out as a public health community from the beginning of studying it. We're now 5 months out, but we have to be really clear when we're only 5 months out of studying a new disease and a new infection, anything that we are recommending or talking about in this illness is in the context that this will change as we learn more about the disease, the course of disease, the infection, how infectious it is, how easily it's spread, and how it affects different people. So all of it comes with an asterisk that we are learning as we go. So here in La Plata County, we have 85 confirmed cases. we, around the state of Colorado, I think we have about, actually, I'm not going to say the numbers off the top of my head because I'm blanking on what they are at this hour of the day. But what we need to say is that we usually in any community suspect that whatever number of confirmed cases you have should be multiplied by a factor of 3 to 5, in some cases 10, and it depends on how quickly your community was able to stand up testing. So when we say we have 85 cases, we know that we did not capture all of the cases in the community. The other thing is Colorado is currently using the stat that there is suspicion that about 3% of the population in Colorado has been exposed to COVID-19 so far in this pandemic. Based on the way that we are tracking numbers with the data that we have, with the data that we're looking at with Centura, we do believe that that number is probably lower for our community. So we also just want to be clear about that we think we were able to contain quickly and shut down before we passed around as much infection as other communities in Colorado. And we do have some data to support that, but again, it all comes with the caveat that we're learning as we go. So 85 cases, 50 have met our definition of a recovery, 11 hospitalized, and then we have had 3,600 people get diagnostic testing here in this jurisdiction. We've had another 2,000 or 3,000 have antibody testing. We can have another conversation about antibody testing. And then we have a data dashboard up on our website that is updated daily with our stats, and then it's updated weekly with our testing stats. So here is, Mike Murphy had a slide very similar to this for what he was looking at regionally. This is our version of a similar slide where the purple line shows you the cumulative cases and the blue lines talk about how what the days that those cases have been reported to us. So we'll see that it is uneven initially because we had, kind of pent up need and a backlog of cases. We found higher numbers of cases. We then put in, and we, meaning the state of Colorado, put in lots of social distancing measures, and we've seen that decrease. So the question that we've been asked to present on today, that was just the background information. So what we've been asked to talk about today is the new information that's come out around face coverings in the last couple of weeks since we all met and had this discussion before. So there is new research that is part of it. There was a study commissioned by the World Health Organization. It was published in a peer-reviewed journal, The Lancet, and it describes it is a summary of 172 observational studies about efficacy of mask wearing. And so we'll be reviewing some of that data today. And this review of 172 observational studies has now been published in The Lancet and then has also worked its way into proceedings of the National Academies of Sciences, which talk about how we're, what the potential efficacy of wearing a face mask is to prevent spread of infection in a community setting. And I think that some of what has happened in the US is there was mixed science in the beginning between healthcare settings and community settings. And so there's been new science and information to kind of untease that data. So moving on to the next slide, the World Health Organization that commissioned this study is really clear that in the review of 172 observational studies, these are not the highest level of standard of scientific studies, right? So the gold standard in any scientific endeavor is a randomized double-blind controlled study where you would do trials and figure out, what is having best efficacy for any intervention. So when we are in the middle of a global pandemic, learning as we go, that is not possible to have that type of data yet. So they instead reverse engineer observational studies of different things that happen that then have enough information to study and figure out the statistics on. So that's why the information sounds mixed, because they're saying, well, it's not the highest quality scientific evidence because it is not randomized, double-blind, controlled studies, but it is a review of observational science, observational studies. So with that, the conclusion of the World Health Organization is that that masks can be helpful to limit spread through droplet transmission when it is not possible to keep physical distancing. So this is very consistent with what we have said as San Juan Basin since we first issued an advisory, which is, best case scenario is that we maintain our 6-foot distance or that we limit our interactions with other humans. If it's not possible, a face covering can keep your droplets to yourself and prevent you from spreading infection to others. There are potentially other ways that COVID-19 is spread. This only works around droplet transmission. So that is the summary of the World Health Organization data. The CDC has issued its guidance and data, which says that people older than the age of 2 in public settings where it is difficult to maintain other social distancing should also wear a face covering. They put the caveats on that children under 2 should not, and anyone with difficulty breathing, unconscious, incapacitated, or otherwise unable to remove a mask without assistance. And then they also recommend that people confer with their providers. So what we don't want to do is get in between as public health individuals and their healthcare providers. So all of this guidance goes out with and work with your individual healthcare provider if you have underlying conditions or issues that you want to discuss. So that's what the CDC guidance on this is. And then in the state of Colorado, in the state of Colorado, we, in the Safer at Home order issued by the governor, which was the transition from stay at home, the transition began April 27th, but took a week or 2 to implement, depending on where you lived in Colorado, and that was the stay at home to safer at home transition. We're now on the 6th Amendment to safer at home, expecting the 7th Amendment this week, but it does specifically talk about recommendations for non-medical face coverings in public, and then for specific types of businesses and sectors, it recommends face coverings for patrons, and then in some cases requires them for staff and employees. So that's what the state of Colorado current orders are. And then I think the other thing we threw in a slide at the last minute that we wanted to talk about, which was the East Canyon fire. I think lots of us are probably tracking what the progress on this fire has been in the last couple of days. I think we should probably just rename this slide to wildfire smoke and COVID-19, because we do want to be clear that there will be additional complications with air quality and COVID-19 and how those intersect. So some of the things that we know is that people that are susceptible to COVID-19, higher risk and higher complications from catching COVID-19, and are often significantly overlapped with populations that are the same populations that we target air quality messages to during a wildfire smoke exposure event like we were starting to have this week with the East Canyon fire, and we may have others as this summer goes on. So we are making sure that we're getting messaging out about the best thing that people can do, and some of this will have specific guidance around face coverings for wildfire smoke, and what works and what doesn't work. And then also the added complication that some of our physical reactions to smoke exposure can be very similar to initial symptoms for COVID-19. So we have to also kind of work through how we're going to get community messaging. Certainly people experiencing dry cough, sore throat, difficulty breathing, that can be either wildfire smoke or onset of COVID-19. So we'll be working through that. And I think that is all I have for today, except just to say that it's going to continue to take all of us working together to keep our curve flat. I think we have been very, very successful. I think that we have evidence that neighboring communities have struggled, and it has been important that we as a community have come together and understood that we can do things like wash our hands, maintain hygiene, maintain sanitation, wear face coverings, keep 6 feet from other individuals, stay home if you're sick. I think I talked about cleaning and disinfecting, and just being thoughtful around how we spend our time, and we as a community continue to keep our case count low. That is all I have.
Thank you, Leanne. Any questions for Leanne? And then I do want to ask council whether, in anticipation of a decision on masks later on, if we want to advance that decision to this point in the agenda, or whether we want to leave that during administrative action under item 12 later on. Similarly, I think Chief Brammer is still in the wings and may have any questions that he can respond to at this time as well. But starting with questions from Leanne, and then we'll talk about the schedule here in a moment.
I just want to thank you, Leanne. Thanks for waiting that out, and for your presentation as always. It's always super.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm sorry. It's I think I'm turning into a pumpkin by this hour at this point.
No,
I will make sure you guys have the slides. The slides have all of the what do you call those things? The links in them, the footnotes. I definitely turned into a pumpkin by hour 5, whatever it is. So it has all the footnotes. If there's any additional information that you want, I will make sure that I send them to Mitchell. Yes, Amber. Okay.
Thank you, Leanne. Any other counselors have questions? And if not, then I'd prompt the question of whether we want to entertain conversation about masks at this point, or leave it on the regularly published agenda for item 12.
So Dean, just in reference to the conversation we had 2 hours ago.
Yes.
I think that by now people would have been on because they would have thought it would have been by now. So whatever council wants to do, I don't think there's going to be any issues with.
That's exactly what I thought, Kim. Exactly. I would entertain the idea of bringing forth the discussion of item 12.1, which is the reconsideration of eliminating or extending the face mask ordinance to this point in the discussion. But at first, I would like to ask if there's any remaining questions for Chief Brammer, so we can send him home to an eventful evening. Any further questions for Chief?
Chief Brammer, thank you. I know that I got quite a few questions from a constituent, and I forwarded them to you, and I don't necessarily want to take the time tonight, but I was wondering if we could possibly have you answer those. And then I think all of this is really helpful if we could put it on the website in some way for the public to be able to access it and view it. I think it's positive information that is important for the community to hear. My one question I did have was with regard to the interceding. I was concerned about how a junior officer might feel confident or empowered to intercede, particularly if the supervisor was engaged in something of questionable, maybe too much force. And I wondered if you could talk about how you inculcate that into the culture here in Durango, that's the expectation.
Well, that's a culture that we as a police department, I believe, have established and will continue to reiterate throughout our ranks. And we set that by example. So, I mean, there's been situations, to use myself as an example, where an incident's been going on where I have had to intercede and we've had to report it and we've gone back and we've dealt with it. And people see that and they develop confidence in the system and they understand that there are protocols in place and there's a right thing to do at a right time in order to deal with it. And then we have a process in order to go through to investigate that and then see what type of wrongdoing is there. But we have a duty, and we teach this all the time in all of our classes, you know, even if it's just verbally escalating a situation where we're in conflict with somebody and there's signs that we're starting to lose a little bit of control, or we call it tap outs. So we'll go up and one of us, we work our way in and we continue to work that out. So the new guys just have to see the veteran officers doing that. And I see our veterans officers doing that, you know, throughout my course of my career, 15 years with the Durango Police Department.
Thank you. And I had one more question. I believe you're going to be, or the officers will be engaging in some training up at the college, or either with LGBTQ, transgender, and then also some discussions with some of the students at the college. Is that correct?
I'm unaware of that. I'm personally meeting with some of the faculty and coaches.
Oh, that's it. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm doing that to start the process. Again, that's much like the Community Relations Commission's meeting tomorrow. It's to set the stage for future listening sessions and future conversations that we can have. And then just to backtrack really quickly on the email that you sent me, if you'd like me to, I can address those questions and send it back out to council, or I can add it to my running list of Q&As and then share that, and then we can publish that as well. And I believe that's going to be one of the initiatives that the CRC is also going to be looking at doing.
I think the second option is better, just to keep it as a running list, just so we answer the constituents' questions.
Absolutely. And I'll try to get that tomorrow. I should be able to. I've already reviewed those questions. Many of them I answered this evening, but I'll certainly be able to put that in written format by tomorrow.
Thank you, Chief. This, for those folks out there in the community, this will be an ongoing community discussion, and I expect to see a lot more of Chief Bramer in the future as an educational process for our community. I think it's not just about the police department; it's about those other aspects of community, serving community needs that are identified as necessary within our community to reduce our dependence on police protection throughout. So I think that's the conversation that Durango will be having over the course of the next few weeks and months. So thank you so much, Chief.
It's my pleasure, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. And secondly, I'd like to thank Leanne and Mike for hanging in there with us late into the evening here to talk about, give us those statistics and some good background for decision-making for our community relative to the mandatory mask ordinance. And so I'd like to talk about item 12.2, which is, or excuse me, 12.1, and ask Amber if she could prep us for that decision. Or I should say.
So I think we need a motion to move that item. Is that correct, Dirk, since we're changing the agenda?
Sure. And thank you for that clarification. And I would like to get council consensus and in the form of a motion, if that's an item that we'd like to entertain out of regular agenda, published agenda format.
I'll make a motion to move item 12.1 to presentations and have that discussion now on face masks.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. May we have a roll call, please?
Councillor Bettine?
Yes.
Councillor Youssef?
Yes.
Councillor Noseworthy?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter?
Yes.
And Mayor Brickey?
Yes. Thank you. And if I could ask Interim Manager Amber Blake to provide a short background on the decision that we did make and its expiration date and what our options are moving forward.
Oh, yes. The city council directed me at a previous council meeting to work with the city attorney to draft an order and sign it that was for mandatory face coverings within Durango. This face covering order is specifically when individuals cannot maintain 6 distance of social distancing from each other, and encourages enforcement via voluntary compliance and education. The order is set to expire this Friday, and a decision tonight would be a request to extend that order. We will update the date on the order and I will re-sign the order, and we will continue that under the current emergency declaration.
Excellent. Thank you, Amber. We can have a discussion by any member of council and as to possible actions, either to let this law sunset or establish a new date for an extension, or that's basically the options, or to revise the content of the order itself if there's any concern about specifics that were implemented in this particular order. So with that, I'd entertain comments from council. I've got one question for Amber, which is there any update on the amount of public sentiment that's come in probably since the last update you gave us 2 hours ago? So if you could remind us of those numbers once again, if you have them there.
I do have them. I have not continued to read emails during this meeting, so I don't have an update, and that is not standard practice that we would take comment throughout the meeting via email. So we have a total of 377 emails, either to the city council address or to public comment at durangogov.org. 301 of those comments were supporting an extension of the face covering order, and 76 of those were in favor of dropping the face covering order, so against the extension.
Thank you.
I have a question, Dean.
So do I.
An update from BID or from the chamber about how businesses are doing with this and what their feelings are about it, if it's supportive or how it's working for them?
Good question. Chris, do you have an update from the chamber perhaps?
Yeah, the chamber met this morning and they discussed this again at length. It was brought up by their executive director, and they unanimously voted to ask him to write a letter to all of you. I don't know if that letter's been received yet or not. Amber, have you seen anything from Jack Llewellyn on that yet?
Jack is one of our attendees.
Yeah, I can tell you the content of the meeting. I just didn't know if Jack had sent that. I haven't seen it yet. But the content of the letter essentially would be that the board is in favor of us extending the mask order that we have in place. And they, had quite a bit of conversation. It was a unanimous decision. And the feedback in general was that those particular folks who were participating in that and the people that I heard from felt that it was a necessary continuance based on the conditions, both with the virus and with running their businesses and their customers and their employees feeling safe.
I would like to make one other comment that I've received some more emails about people who didn't realize that we were having technical difficulties earlier and felt that they may have missed an opportunity to contribute. So I just wanted to let everybody, I just wanted to remind the public that we were having technical difficulties, unfortunately, and it was out of our control. So we apologize for that.
I might say the technical difficulties were in terms of camera producing, not reception of those comments, but that's, and thank you. So is there anyone that's heard from, do we have any response from BID in any formal manner relative to the downtown business owners or those members of BID? Okay.
No, but I've received emails from people who work downtown, both for and against. And I would say the emails that I was keeping track of tracked that 25% against 75%. Thank you very much. But it was not formal. It was just the keeping track of the emails that are coming in. And I will say I read all 360 that came in through here, but I will not be responding to each one of those emails, but I did open them up and read them.
Well, and I'd like to respond to each of those 300 plus folks that have not heard a response from me. I will be responding to each and every one of them in time, and I have tried to keep up. But actually, between this and Unfund the Police Department, there's been an unprecedented amount of public expression. So we appreciate that. That's part of the public process, and we will be getting back to you. So
Jack did write in something. If you want, I can read it briefly since he wrote it in this morning. I'm just pulling it up now. Would you like me to?
I think it's probably important for.
Yeah, he wrote this to Amber. I was copied in. Kevin was copied in, and I'll forward it on to all of you. But it says, "Good morning. The Durango Chamber of Commerce board meeting was this morning. I asked the board if they were for or against extending the mask ordinance, and they unanimously were in favor of extending the ordinance. Reasons given were support the recommendations of San Juan Basin Public Health and Mercy Medical Center, rely on the healthcare professionals for recommendations and guidance. Wearing a mask protects the elderly and at-risk individuals. Businesses can cite the ordinance as the reason for requiring to wear one in the store." Other comments from board members included 90% of customers are wearing masks, and if they don't have one and are asked to wear one, the majority are accommodating, and small inconvenience to protect others. And that's the bulk of the email.
Thank you, Chris. Is there any discussion around the comment that's been made that the stifling business, that the people are not coming here and they're causing financial distress amongst our business community because of our mask ordinance?
Well, I would just voice that I'm hearing an overwhelming that when people feel safe, then they'll come out and start shopping. And that when I read all those emails, that was a consistent comment. And it's also things I've been hearing. And as someone who is downtown every day, I see that and chat with people and they say, yeah, the mask, I'll go to the stores that have the mask and alternately, and we've gotten those emails that said, no, I won't go. But my own view is that people will start shopping when they feel like they are safe.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Councilor Noseworthy. That's been my experience as well. I think we are open. In fact, we're pleasantly surprised by our own sales tax revenue statistics that show that we are not encountering the downturn in sales tax revenue that we anticipated as a result of coronavirus. And in fact, many of our commercial entities are thriving. I shouldn't say thriving, but certainly reopening with sustained vengeance. So that's.
Deanne would like to say something.
Yes.
Yeah, I think this is just to kind of confirm what people's suspicion and intuition is. So we talked earlier in the presentation that there were new studies released this week that were commissioned by the WHO and published in the Lancet. There is also a preprint study that was released today by Health Affairs, which is a journal that tracks medical and public health. And so they did this really interesting study. And again, this is all in absence of, what we know is the gold standard for scientific inquiry. But what they did is they said, we can start to really do some really good observational studies because there are about 15 states that have done mask orders as opposed to then the 35 that haven't. And then there's certain cities that have within those 15 states. And so the mask orders went into effect anywhere, I think, from like the first week in April until well into the middle of May. And so they're taking the initial communities that had mask orders and comparing them to communities that didn't have mask orders and then trying to figure out and then controlling for other things, obviously, to get an observational study. And so they are of the belief, and this is it's preprint, so it will be published if it, passes the next scientific rigor. But what it says is that mask use increases over time for at least 3 weeks, slowing spread of disease. So that it takes even, the first 5 days mask use might have a small impact. And then the next 5 days it has a better. So you guys are only, or, we as a community, I guess, are only in the 3rd to 4th week of having the mask order. And you're still, based on the science that is out there right now, on the upswing of the efficacy of using it to to slow and stop the spread of infection. So I just wanted to, it sounds like the conversation at the chamber, people are intuitively getting that change takes time and understanding the effect of change takes time. But I think it's really interesting that you guys are revisiting it right at the time that we're studying it, saying, yep, we can still demonstrate it increases. And that this study is saying that, they're going to be able to prove that hundreds of thousands of cases were averted by the 15 states that did mask orders. So it's just an interesting piece of information. And I think it confirms that people are intuitively pretty smart in this community. So I just want to throw that in.
And then, Dean, I do have an email from Tim Walsworth. Sorry.
Sure.
Long day. So if I can read it to the council, it's a couple paragraphs long, but what Tim said on behalf of BID is that BID has not done any surveying of our constituent businesses about the mask order. We hear anecdotally that some customers don't want to wear a mask and still try to come in anyway and claim they have a medical condition so they don't have to wear one. Or that other stores are not enforcing it, so why is this store? If the city wants BID to do a survey, we're happy to do so, but of course we would need some more time. I feel that the measures we are taking have worked and continue to work. Since May 8th, 38 days ago, when retail, offices, and personal services opened, La Plata County positive cases have only increased by 21. Since Memorial Day weekend, 24 days ago, there have only been 9 cases, and since restaurants could reopen on May 27th, 19 days ago, there have only been 5 new cases. Until yesterday, La Plata County had gone 10 days straight without a new case. The governor announced yesterday a way for communities to move into the next phase of opening and to increase their capacity limits in places like indoor and outdoor venues and for gatherings up to 500, but only if certain health stats are maintained, which right now we are achieving due in part to face coverings. My only question about the order is, can a face shield serve as a face covering? Some in customer service want to wear this instead, as it allows the customer to see the employee's full face, which helps in many ways. Wondering if this can qualify for a face covering. So I guess my question would be, Leanne, what would be, I don't know, I don't want to put you on the spot, but what would your thoughts be on a face shield?
I'm going to put my epidemiologist on the spot, but I believe that a face shield would work and be consistent with the guidance that we are providing, which is keep your droplets to yourself. Sammy, not to put you on the spot, but do you agree with that assessment? You know what? You should never introduce something with not to put you on the spot because it means you're going to.
That's okay. I think that, yeah, I would agree with that statement, Leanne. And then also I think you have to take into consideration that if the employee walks away from that face shield to walk around the counter or to walk to the break room and sitting in the break room, that then you would then want to wear a face covering. So if it's going to start getting confusing with the employee of like, oh, I can take off the mask for like 10 minutes when I'm standing in this one spot, but then as soon as I turn around, I have to put it back on. It would require a lot more diligence. So I would take that into consideration.
But we can provide some guidance then once we've had a little time to digest the request, I think is what we're saying. And add it to our self-certification guidance.
I would concur with that. I know that they're often used in medical environments as well. So are we, any other discussion amongst counselors?
No more discussion for me, but I just want to thank Leanne Jolin and Mike Murphy, both of you guys for your presentations tonight. So very, very helpful to have you here helping us in this discussion for our community. It's so important. And I want to thank the 360 plus people who've responded to council. This is a significant issue for our community. And I think that what we're seeing now, you know, what really resonated for me too was listening to Mr. Murphy suggest that, you know, we have been effective on the front end, and we have, and Leanne as well, we've done a good job at minimizing, reducing the spread of the virus. And I think that to stop now would be premature. I think our focus now needs to be on reopening our community, We want to open up. And as was noted by, I think it was a senior advisor for Colorado's COVID-19 response, the stronger the local public health systems are, the more we can reopen. And I know that now we want to encourage tourism. We want to encourage visitors. We want our residents to get out and feel safe in our downtown and in our restaurants and in our stores. And everything that I am reading and seeing suggests that the best way to stop the spread of the virus is through face masks. And so I think that to stop now would be premature. I think it's working, and I think I would be in favor of extending.
Thank you, Melissa. I also want to thank Sammy Stevens. It was the other person that we should recognize as our
Thank
chief.
you. Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you, Sammy.
And but well said. And any other comments from council? The other, if we're trending towards an extension of the face mask ordinance, we should also consider the duration for that extension. I have a couple dates in mind. Each of them end on a Friday for consistency with other ordinances that we've done, and that would be July 24th or August 7th are both Fridays, or any other ideas that you might have in mind in terms of appropriate duration, if in fact we vote to extend this ordinance.
Leanne, do you anticipate when you might have information about when the efficacy starts to diminish on the face masks? You might not have it now, but
referencing efficacy is increasing, meaning that it is increasing the percentage of spread that it is slowing or preventing, right?
Diminishing the spread, yes.
So eventually, let's just say like in the first couple of days, it stops spreading, or it slows spreading by this percent, and then it's a little longer, and then a little bit more. When it diminishes, the diminishing return is going to be that it's no longer increasing how much but it's still preventing spread, right? Okay. So as long as you have community transmission or risk of community transmission, and I guess what I will say is, as a tourist community, even when our case count is extraordinarily low, and we believe we've had good availability of good access to testing, and a low case count, which a lot of places with low case count didn't have the accessibility to testing that we've had. So we believe that that is the case for our community. We're going to continue to have visitors and tourists to our community, so we're always going to be at risk of transmission. So until we learn more about this virus, there is no timeline that we can give to say this is when the right time to change this is, right? And we also all have to recognize this is hard, this is challenging, we want to get back to normal. Face coverings right now appear to be very good steps to getting things back to normal, but we can't give an end date to when that would change.
And then the last thing,
that this is a trifecta of things that affect this. So we have mask wearing, social distancing, and personal hygiene, and we don't want to forget the other two because those are very, very important also.
Yep. And don't touch your face, and I touch my face all the time. And
I washed. Thank you, everybody, for those comments. I think, as is the case for this particular ordinance that is sunsetting this Friday, pending our action, we can take a cautious and optimistic date, or we can put it out further in the future and then resend it if, in fact, the statistics are trending that we no longer have to be concerned about it. So. With that, I'd entertain a motion.
Could you give those dates again that you suggested?
The short term would be Friday, July 27th, or excuse me, July 24th, or August 7th would be another date.
Mayor, can I ask a question, please? So far, I haven't heard from all the counselors. This is a very large topic for our community, and I really think it's important that we hear from all 5 counselors as to whether they want to extend and for why. And so a lot of good questions being asked, but I think we need to all, make our voices heard.
Mm-hmm.
It would be my at least request for the community.
And thank you, Councilor Youssef. You've you have further comment, or you've made a wonderful statement. So, up. You're not.
We didn't hear anything you said, Melissa.
You're muted. Still muted.
You're muted now. You're backwards. You're backwards.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so did you guys hear my request that we hear from all counselors? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
You did hear that request. Okay, I'd love to hear from the other counselors. My emotions, my position remains the same.
Excellent. Thanks so much.
Sorry.
Well, I'll jump in.
Excellent.
I can jump in.
Barbara.
Yeah, no, I fully support this. I spent a fair bit of time over the weekend looking at the literature. And Leanne, I know you mentioned it, the National Academy of Sciences, and that was written up in the Forbes magazine as face masks being a critical measure with the other issues of social distancing and hand washing. So I will support this, and I actually would prefer going out to an extended date and then monitoring it. And if we need to pull it, if it warrants removing it, then we can have that discussion.
Thank you, Barbara. And there doesn't need to be a duration on here. We can adopt the law, the ordinance with no end date, and then rescind it at an appropriate time as well as another option. Go ahead.
That would actually be my preference, is that we set it and then we continue to monitor it as we monitor our finances and everything else. And we continue to keep getting public input. But I think setting an arbitrary date just will then, again, we'll have to have this conversation at a prescribed time rather than when we actually think it's appropriate.
Councilor Bettine, do you have further comment?
Yeah, it's going to be brief. I haven't seen anything from anything reputable that would recommend anything other than continue with this ordinance. We've certainly heard a ton of public feedback, more than any other issue I've ever seen since I've been on council. I've never received that many emails on any issue. And the high predominance of them being asking us to continue this for public health and safety. And so I'm going to go with the science on this one, since I'm not a scientist, and listen to the experts and continue to do that all along the path until they say that that's not the best plan. Then I'll think of another plan. But for right now, that seems right. And I agree with Barbara. I don't think we should put the community through this debate every month because we had to receive 300 and however many letters, and people have to contend with this, and they're contending with enough in their lives. Right now. So I think let's pass this thing, and then we'll rescind it when necessary.
Thank you, Chris. Councilor Baxter, any closing thoughts? Or
Yeah, thank you, Dean. I think that having this mask order and helping to protect our community and having visitors coming from other areas that maybe don't have the same tradition of masking, it's really good to have it be in order so that can be explained to them. And one of the things that for me that a mask order seems to do is it will allow us to continue opening our businesses, to continue to getting people back employed. And I think that that's incredibly important. And anything that we can do that will help accelerate that and make it safe is, in my mind, absolutely something we should do. So for our economy and our people, I think we need to do that.
Thank you, Kim. Mayor Pro Tem Kim, not and do you have a thought on duration?
I'm inclined to go whatever direction the council thinks we should go, and I also agree that I think that people put so much time and effort into this that I would hate to be sort of requesting them to do it every 4 weeks. But on the other hand, I'm okay with whatever council decides on that.
Thank you so much. My thoughts are very simple and in line with my fellow councilors, and that is, I do have the lens of a number of other mayors, specifically in recreation-based economies, those towns in Colorado that entertain the tourist economy and open their doors to the traveling public. And certainly that's what we're attempting to do. We're attempting to do that in the most robust way we possibly can, and the safest way to invite them to our community and be safe for our residents as well as our employees, as well as the visiting public, is to encourage the safe and sustained reopening and utilizing social distancing, masks, and proper hygiene. And that's, I mean, it seems so basic. It's not, it is a medical issue. It's not an ideological issue to me at all. It's very, very simple. As the Herald published, Professor Guilford talked about, we used to wear, the West always wore masks. And so now we have an opportunity to, for a limited period of time, relish in our past and wear masks. So I think this is our opportunity to do that and do something good for the public. So with that, I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we renew the mask order with an indefinite date.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. There was also the issue of the possible amendment for the utilization of plastic surrounds or shields instead of masks or in lieu of masks. I don't know if that's a technicality that we can just ask our city manager to get with the public health department and make proper inserts into the ordinance. And our action tonight is limited to just extending the ordinance in its current words. But
we could call it appropriate face coverings.
That's right.
And with them be determined by the San Juan Basin Public Health.
Okay. So amended. It's been moved. If we can add that to your motion, Councillor Noseworthy?
Sure. I move that we renew the mask ordinance with language that covers face coverings as approved by the San Juan Basin Public Health, and that we renew it with an indeterminate date.
Excellent. Can I have that reseconded, please?
Second.
Thanks. It's been moved and seconded. May we have a roll call, please?
Councillor Bettine?
Yes.
Councillor Noseworthy?
Yes.
Councillor Youssef?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter?
Yes.
And Mayor Bricky?
Yes. Thank you very much. And thanks to all of our community, and hope we can live through this. Thanks so much. With that, we're moving right along into the last presentation, which is 5.4 on our agenda, the financial management report. Devin Schmidt, are you available and still up?
I'm still here. Thank you, Mayor Bricky. And good evening, members of City Council. I am going to share my screen with you all and provide you the financial update for May. All right, looks like we have this up. So I'm going to start by providing the May monthly financial report for the City of Durango. I'm Devin Schmidt, the acting finance director for the City of Durango. I would like council to note that we are working on revising the format of our sales tax report as well as our monthly financials. And so just wanted to put that out there and let the community and council know that. So for starters, as Dean mentioned, our May sales tax numbers are not as bleak as we had originally forecasted. They are currently 15% down for May. Last year at this same time, sales tax was up 1.4%. Use tax is down 40.4%. And this time last year, it was up 45.1%. Motor vehicle tax is down 37.2%. And this same time last year, it was down 24.3%. Moving on to some of the sales tax by district. So South Durango is the lion's share for sales tax collections at $848,000. The Central Business District was at $444,000, followed by North Durango at $228,000. This time last year, South Durango was also the lion's share of the sales tax at $744,000, followed by the Central Business District at $545,000. And then North Main came in at $222,000. So comparing this in the same information to this time last year, the Central Business District, this tells us that the Central Business District saw more revenues than they did to date this year.
Devin, may I ask you a question, please?
Sure.
On the 15% negative for May, is that over previous year's May, the 2019 May, or is it 15% down from our projection for the budget?
So that is part of our 15% budgeted amount there.
Thank you. I wanted to clarify that.
Thank you for that question, Barbara. And what I'm seeing is that South Durango is actually exceeding last year's production by, you said 800, it's currently 848, and last year it was 700 and something.
That's right. Yes. Yep. That's correct, Dean. One item to note on that is we didn't have the 0.5% for the 2019 sales tax all of last year. So it's a little problematic to try and compare the two, but it is positive from that standpoint, you know, just to reflect that we are up compared to last year at this
And the very encouraging number was the 228 in North Durango. That means that reopening is really reopening. It is robust and it's in excess of what was, again, another area that was in excess of revenue collected last year, with the minor exception of the half-cent sales tax that you noted. And the only area that's down somewhat, but almost back to where it was last year, was the 440 in the Central Business District. And that's just, I think, a little cautiousness by our Central Business District merchants to reopen fully. And with the measures that we're taking in terms of getting our restaurants back fully reopened, and then I think we'll see a much higher increase next month as well there. So it certainly seems to me like we are in fact reopened. So thank you. Yeah. Thank you for that presentation.
Absolutely. So moving in then to our monthly financials. So this is our revenue and expenditure comparative report for the general fund. I'm going to kind of hit this at a high level because I know it's late, but so I'm going to start with the general fund year to date. The general fund year to date has received $15,427,587 in revenues. For the month of May, the general fund received $3,467,290 in revenues. In expenditures, year to date, the general fund is at $15,502,244. And for the month of May, the general fund expenditures are $3,208,217. The year-to-date budget compared to expenditures reflects a $2,042,617 down compared to the estimated budget. However, expenditures are also down by $3,859,005 compared to the estimated year-to-date budget. So this means that the estimated year-to-date budget compared to expenditures is positive in the amount of $1,816,389. But actual revenues to expenditures reflects a deficit of $74,657. And that's right down here. This is positive and reflects that some of the cost-saving initiatives are creating a positive relationship between revenues and expenditures. This also suggests that last year, May was the month where the general fund started to enter the positive. So you can see in 2019, we started to enter the positive at 71,546. Compared to 18, however, though, we were at this point in time still $516,263 down in the general fund. So if I don't have any questions on the general fund, I will move to our enterprise funds. The enterprise funds, we're working to provide revenue analysis and expenditure analysis that will inform council about where we are at on a monthly and a year-to-date basis. But for now, I'm just going to talk about the year-to-date actuals, revenues to expenditures. So the water fund year-to-date is revenues we've received is $2,091,762. Expenditures reflects $1,302,618. And so that is in the positive of $789,144. The sewer fund reflects revenues of year-to-date $3,005,026 and expenditures of $3,190,000, 175. So that one is actually behind $185,149. In the airport fund, revenues year-to-date are $1,223,500. Expenses are $440,103, and that's year-to-date. So we're behind in the airport fund revenues to expenditures actuals $216,603. In the sustainable services fund, our revenue is $1,257,708 year-to-date. Expenses are $786,391. So we're ahead in the sustainable services fund by $471,317. And in the transportation fund, we are at $669,791 in revenues and $1,448,841 in expenditures. So that reflects a net or a behind of $779,049. So a few items to note here is that we are still slated to receive CARES Act funding for the airport and the transportation fund. And as I mentioned previously, we need to do the same analysis that we've done on the general fund to know when we actually receive revenues versus expenditures to be able to provide council where we're tracking in a year-to-date fashion. And we'll have that at the next study session. I'm going to move on. Go ahead.
Just to ask, so on these, the expenditures related to capital improvement projects, they are not included in these numbers?
They are not. These are operating.
Just operating, okay.
Yes, that's correct. Do I have any other questions on the enterprise fund before I move on? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move on to our special revenues funds. So our special revenues fund in the 2015 sales tax fund, revenues to date is $1,582,663. We do not have any expenditures in that fund to date because we are going to be making those transfers into the CIP. Should council make the change in the CIP policy to move forward in the 2021 budget to isolate those funds, these numbers would be a little bit more live. So I just wanted to make that quick note. In the road impact fee fund, we have $156,899 in revenues and no expenditures in that fund to date. In the Durango Tourism Fund, we are at $186,945 in revenues and $242,018 in expenditures. So we're $55,073 behind in that fund. In the 2005 quarter cent open space parks and trails sales tax fund, we have a revenue of $803,049 and expenses of $157,925. So we're ahead in that fund by $645,124. In the debt service, the other part of the quarter cent, we have revenues of $795,157 and expenditures of $1,013,945. So we are behind in that fund by $210,896. Do I have any questions on the special revenue funds?
Devin, I know that I sent you a list of these with what our negatives or positive balances were, and you responded that you needed to do the analysis to see the timing of revenues and expenses like we've done in the general fund, which I really appreciate because I think that's important. But the 2005 quarter cent debt does concern me. So do you have any idea when we might be getting that look at what the timing actually has been in the past and what it should be in the future so we know when we go positive, hopefully?
So you're asking as far as that I don't have the analysis right now, Kim, but that's going to be part of our study session update next week so that we know exactly where we start going into the positive on some of these funds. That one, obviously, the expenditures and revenues are pretty flat. Well, the revenues are not flat right now, but the expenditures for that fund are obviously flat. You can see each month we pay the debt service of the $200,789. And so that is going to obviously track with our sales tax numbers. But I'm going to check and see historically at what point we start doing that. Just ad hocly thinking about the way the general fund was running, if last year we started going into the positive in May, I would say that some of these funds that are sales tax driven would follow that similar format. But we're going to definitely have that analysis for next week.
That would be wonderful. My forecasting said approximately June, so but that wouldn't bring this into a positive. So yeah, it'd be great to actually see that and to know as we're going forward, as our hopeful increases in sales tax revenue occur, how much we're eating away at that, so that we don't end up negative, since we can't be negative.
Right, absolutely. At some point, council will have to make the decision to offset that with general fund monies or something of that nature, but it would be helpful to know at what point we normally hit the positive in some of these special revenue funds.
Right, so we're not making that decision the month we need to do it. We're making the decision a couple months ahead of time.
Absolutely.
And Devin, could I ask just on the previous slide on the special, on the enterprise funds, are we at risk of being overextended because of some of the CIP project expenditures?
I would say not at this point, Barbara, because the CIP acts as a transfer into those other CIP funds. And since there's been so many deferrals between the enterprise funds, I would say at this point, we are not at risk, but I can include that in our analysis next week if that would be helpful.
I think it would be very helpful to see it all in one snapshot so that we can see just the full picture there rather than alternating between reports. Thank you.
Certainly. I will make note to add that into our meeting next week to show CIP in each enterprise fund. Okay. I am now going to move into the internal service funds. So in our internal service funds, general services fund revenue is $25,111. Expenses are $88,120. So that puts us behind at $63,009. SURF fund revenue is $87,014. Expenses are $1,738,919. The self-insurance fund, revenues are $2,680,000, $24. Expenses are $2,500,037, which puts us ahead at $179,987. And the risk manager fund is at a revenue of $677,420. Expenses are at $717,655, and that puts us behind at $40,235. Obviously, that SURF number sounds concerning. However, if council recalls in the budget process, we did have additional funds to offset that expense. And we have not made any of those internal SURF fund transfers to date. In the event council gives direction for us not to make those to offset some of the costs and some of the other funds, because there was a surplus in SURF.
Devin, we've talked about this before too, that having that net that we're talking about right now, how well we're doing, and then also listing the fund balance or reserve that is associated with each fund. That way we would know what the impact is on the reserves, and also that would help us indicate whether or not we needed to do something now or we could wait, kind of thing, based upon their fund balance and their reserve balance.
Perfect. I'll add that too.
I think that would add a lot of transparency to what we're discussing.
So, and Devin, that $950,000 expenditure in February, that's a lot of vehicles, I'm assuming, and have those vehicles been delivered, or did we just order them and pay for them?
I would say that it's not likely that we would pay for them until they're delivered and inspected, but I can certainly follow up with our fleet manager on that if that would be helpful. Historically, fleet purchasing has to happen before April, and that's because of the fleet cutoffs with some of the large dealerships. And so if we're looking to do a large purchase, a lot of times those get put in very, very early in the year. And so, but I wouldn't imagine us paying for something that we haven't received.
I just think it's important to note that expenditure took place ahead of the drop in the market and ahead of the issues around COVID. So there might be some questions asked about, new vehicles in the middle of a pandemic, but that took place a month ahead of time.
Right. Okay. So with that, I am going to actually, unless there's any other questions on this information, I'm going to move into our Q1 CIP report. Okay, not seeing any. All right. So on the CIP report for the general fund, we put together a little bit of a new format that is going to give council an indication of what projects are and where they're moving compared to budget and estimated actuals. So currently in the general fund, there is 9 projects. We have 3 projects that are identified and funding is appropriated. We're going to continue to fine tune this report just to try and make it high level for council's needs. We have 1 project in design. We have 1 project that is construction is underway. Or I'm sorry, we have 3 projects that construction is under, or I'm sorry, 1 project construction is underway, 3 projects in progress. So do I have any questions on the general fund CIP projects? Okay.
I do. I have a question. I'm sorry about that. I'm looking at it. You have several on here that you were deferred due to COVID. So I guess my question is, why would they? We actually did not approve them. So why would they be sitting on the report? And should they be removed from this report? And then when we decide to appropriate the money, then they're added back in.
Barbara, I think really good point. We can certainly remove the projects that were deferred due to COVID because obviously that would require council action for those projects to move forward at any given time. So that's part of us just kind of working through and refining this report.
Another idea might just be to like put it at the bottom because I was interested in seeing the projects that we deferred at the same time. So maybe you could just list them underneath or something.
It's pretty clear. I like seeing the projects that we in fact deferred specifically for COVID-related causes. I think it's important to keep them on the list.
Yeah, they should stay in there. I don't know why we would move them out of there.
Yeah.
You just might want to give them their own category rather than lumping them in with project funding, whatever that category is called.
That's fine with me. I just like to see them, but however might make it more clear.
Okay.
Great. Well, I will make sure to keep them on here. We'll just have them very clear that those are deferred projects. All right, moving on to the airport fund. Airport fund has 2 projects that need identified and funding appropriated. It has 1 project in project design. There is 3 currently that are in RFP contracting. We have 4 that are constructions underway and 6 where the project is complete. And I'll keep rolling if I don't have any questions on airport. Oh, I'm sorry, the other part of airport's right here, so I'll let that sit there for a second and see if there's any questions or comments.
I think we'll also hear about airport in just a little bit here, sometime before midnight.
Yes, I will.
Devin, when do you take the money that's left over that shows as project being completed? When does that roll back, into the appropriate enterprise fund or general fund?
So at the time when the project is complete, I think historically we've done that on a quarterly basis, and we'll probably continue to do that quarterly when we get these CIP reports. So when the project is complete and there's no actuals, we certainly want to make sure we've received all the invoices before moving forward with that. So it could be a little bit of timing issue, but finance is in direct contact with all the project managers and department heads. But as soon as we receive that final invoicing and the go ahead from the department, we close that project, which then ultimately rolls that back into the fund balances.
Thank you.
Certainly. Okay, moving on to the utility CIP report. We have 30 projects in water and 12 in sewer. Together in those 2, we have 7 that need identified and funding appropriated. We have 17 that are in project design. We have 4 currently with projects that are in an RFP or the contracting process. And we have 12 where the construction is underway, and we have 2 complete. So if I don't have any questions on utility CIP, I'll just keep moving. In the sustainability fund, we have 1 project that is currently in project design. In the transportation and parking fund, we have 2 projects. And it looks like I need to do a little cleanup on there. I apologize. Those are both in construction. So 2 projects, both in construction, moving along nicely. In the 2005 sales tax fund, we have 8 projects total. We have 3 projects that are in design. We have 5 that project construction is underway. And we have we have 4 that are in construction and 1 that is in right-of-way acquisition permitting. Any questions on the 05 CIP projects? Okay. In the 2015 sales tax fund, we have 15 projects. So we have 6 that are in project design. We have 2 that are in RFP and contracting. We have 6 that are in construction, and we have 1 project that is complete. Any questions on the 15? Not seeing any. Okay, and in the 2019 sales tax fund, we have 1 project that is needing funding appropriated. We have 2 that are in RFP contracting, and we have 3 that are in construction for a total of 6 in the 2019. Any questions on the 19? Okay, any questions on the CIP report in general, or any comments or feedback? All right, well, not hearing any. That is our financial update for tonight. And as I mentioned in the study session, we're trying to move forward with all that analysis. And so we look forward to getting that to city councils and the citizens. And both of these will be posted on the City of Durango finance part of the website. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Devin. Thank you for extremely thorough report that we're being presented with each meeting, and the public needs to a lot to digest here. So thanks for that level of information. With that, it's now 9:32, and we will move on to the consent agenda. So I'd like to have the consent agenda, by the way, is considered for items that are routine or non-controversial and can be adopted in mass, or if any one of the city councilors would like to retract an item from the consent agenda to be considered individually, we can do that as well. So first, I'd like to have a reading of the consent agenda. Ben, are you available?
Yes, sir. Items 6.1, 6.2, and 6.3 are approval of minutes. 6.1 is from the May 19th, 2020 City Council meeting. 6.2 is from the May 26th, 2020 City Council study session. 6.3 is from the June 2nd, 2020 City Council meeting. Items 6.4, 6.5, and 6.6 are requests for public hearings. 6.4 is to consider granting leases and easements for the Aspero Permanent Supportive Housing Project on the City's Social Service Campus, and that's set for July 7, 2020. 6.5 is to consider the Rosemary Lane abandonment, rezone, and conceptual plan development, that's set for July 7, 2020. 6.6 is to consider the approval for the proposed Crater Lot 2RB, which is Southport Gateway Preliminary Minor Subdivision. That's for July 7, 2020. Item 6.7 is discussion and possible action concerning the submission of an administrative planning grant application to support implementation of the Urban Renewal Authority.
Thank you, Ben. I should ask council if there's any items to be pulled from the consent agenda. Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thanks so much. And so it's been approved and seconded. May we have a roll call, please?
Councilor Noseworthy?
Yes.
Councilor Bettine?
Yes.
Councilor Youssef?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter?
Yes.
And Mayor Brookie?
Yes. Thank you so much. We'll move on to Section 9, public hearings. We have 2 items this evening for under our legislative and policy related hearings. Item 9.2 is a public hearing to consider an ordinance authorizing the conveyance of 1/2 interest in city-owned property known as Tract A3 of Macaw Subdivision Number 1, project number 91-142, parentheses 820 Airport Road, to La Plata County. May we have a staff report, please?
Sure, Mayor and City Council. This is Tony Vicari, Director of Aviation at the Durango-La Plata County Airport. This item is pretty straightforward. It has a public hearing, as mentioned, to consider an ordinance which would convey one half of the property interest at 820 Airport Road to La Plata County. As the council will recall, about 1 year ago, the airport acquired a 12.5-acre parcel just north of the existing terminal complex to allow for future development of terminal facilities. That purchase was financed through certificates of participation. Those certificates, as was discussed with council quite recently, were subsequently paid off in April in full with a combination of airport revenues and Federal Aviation Administration grant revenues on that front. And prior to this acquisition, an IGA was entered between the city and La Plata County that would allow for the city to convey one half interest in the title to the county. The city and county are co-owners of the airport, and all land holdings for the airport are held in common between those two entities. This particular conveyance or ordinance rather would simply take this title to this parcel and place it under a similar land holding position as the remainder of airport property are. So quite straightforward in that front. The only other piece of this to consider is that Crossfire LLC is currently leasing back the facilities on that particular piece of property. And this proposed ordinance would also convey one half interest in said lease to effectively assign half interest to the county, with the note that all revenues from that lease would remain within the Airport Enterprise Fund per FAA revenue use policies. So there's no financial implications associated with the proposed conveyance or ordinance. I'm happy to answer any questions before you conduct your hearing.
Thank you, Tony. Is there any questions at this point for Tony, or I'll open up the public hearing for any other comment? First, questions from councilors. Okay, given that, I will open up the public hearing. I don't believe there was any public testimony related to this topic. I should ask Mitchell Carter if there was any remaining testimony, or Amber if we received any specific written testimony on this topic.
I was not forwarded, and I'm not aware of any specific testimony that was submitted prior to the meeting, but if any of the three attendees are here for this public hearing, we can open it up for them.
Thank you. And they should do a hands up or a hand sign.
And raise their hand, please.
Yeah. Mitchell, are any of our participants?
Nobody is raising their hands.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for that. So I'll throw it back to I'll close the public hearing and talk to our counselors about any further discussion. No further discussion. Can I have a motion?
I will make a motion that we pass an ordinance authorizing the conveyance of one half interest in city-owned property known as Tract A3 of McCaw Subdivision 1, project number 91-142, 820 Airport Road to La Plata County. Do we have an ordinance number, Dirk?
Actually, the motion should just be the typical, I'll prepare an ordinance and bring it back at the next meeting. So no, we don't have an ordinance.
That's right, because this was just a public hearing. So please, yes, so that we recommend to the city attorney that he prepare such an ordinance.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Maybe we have a roll call, please.
Councilor Youssef,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter,
Yes.
Councilor Bettine,
Yes.
Councilor Noseworthy,
Yes.
and Mayor Brookie.
Yes. Thank you so much. Moving on, our next policy-related hearing is 9.3, which is a public hearing to consider an ordinance amending Article 5 of Chapter 2, which is their finance, chapter of the city code by addition of a division 4 for the Tabor Emergency Reserve and providing for declaring an effective date. May we have a staff report, please?
Yes, Mayor, I'll take this one. Having just said that we don't normally prepare ordinances for hearings, in this case, I did prepare one. This is a proposal to have council consider creating a portion of the code to allow an option for the designation of real property owned by the city as part of the Tabor Emergency Reserve rather than using cash assets. The current Tabor Reserve is required at 3% of the general fund less debt service. So the current amount required under Tabor to be held in reserve is $1.3 million. It's currently done in cash. As was mentioned previously, City and County of Denver, the state of Colorado, and numerous school districts have opted to take the option of using real estate as an emergency reserve. The biggest issue with the Tabor Emergency Reserve is that the restrictions in Tabor actually make it almost impossible to spend emergency reserves for the kind of things that create the most impact on the city during an emergency, and those are the loss of revenue. So this is set up, and again, if we look at the draft ordinance, it's set up to create an option as part of each budget process to have the city manager and finance director make a recommendation regarding the Tabor Reserve and any property that's suggested to be used to fund that emergency reserve. It could be that part of it's done through a piece of property and part of it's done in cash. The ordinance is set up so that it will be considered each year during the budget process, but I added language in the draft ordinance to allow for a off-cycle consideration of whether to use property for that purpose, which would allow for, assuming this is approved, and the current language would allow for council to approve in the very near future a change in the emergency reserve to designate a piece of property, and then that consideration would come up again during the 2021 budget process. Again, any liquidation, sale, conveyance, or other use of property under the Tabor Emergency Reserve would require further specific approval of council. And in fact, as drafted, this ordinance would require council to approve the designation of any property under the emergency reserve. I sent this draft of the ordinance to Dee Weiser, again, the special counsel we use for Tabor and bond legal advice, and he did not express any concerns with this language as drafted. So again, we're not set to approve this tonight. We're set to have a hearing on this question, and then it'll come back, assuming that council wants to move forward with this. So at this point, I'll turn it back to the mayor. You can open it up for questions from council and the public hearing.
Okay, thank you, Dirk. Appreciate that. And this was initiated based on council conversation with regard to potentially freeing up some cash in the Tabor Reserve for potential need during this coronavirus turn down. So that was our initial impetus, but it seems like a reasonable method of pledging assets for something that quite honestly isn't used that often, and freeing up cash as well. So I'd open it up to council for discussion, but I do need to, for initial comments, and then I'll open it up for public comment, and then pull back into further council discussion. Any comments?
I have a question for Amber. I don't think I see Devin still on here. Do you have a sense of when you might have the list of assets that might be proposed putting into this, into the fund?
Yes, we have a list of assets and we're assessing which ones we would like to recommend. So we have that list and we're reviewing it right now. So staff has that.
So would we see that proposed list before we make a vote, a future vote on approving this, the resolution? Given today's just public hearing.
Right, we can bring forward the entire list. My intention was to bring forward a recommendation of the to council of which property or properties will be used.
And the two are independent of each other. So approving the change allows us, if in the future we want to go this route, to then have that conversation. So they're independent of each other, and it's not a requirement that we do that. That's again another decision to be made. So
I was just trying to get a sense of timing for when we might start thinking about which asset is going in there.
Good points from each of you. Thank you. At this point, I'd ask my other counselors as well if you got any initial comments, or I'll open up for public comment.
I have no comments. I'm ready to hear from the public.
No comment.
Excellent. With that, I'll bang the gavel and open it up for public comment. Open the hearing to the public and ask Mitchell Carter if we have anybody online that is prepped and ready to speak to this issue.
We do still have 3 attendees with us tonight, but nobody is raising their hand.
Okay. We'll give it a second, but 1, 2, 3. And with that, we'll close the public hearing and get back to council for further discussion and or entertaining a motion on this issue to put it for future discussion.
So you've already drafted the ordinance. So Dirk, what would be the appropriate motion then?
The motion is actually on the end of the agenda doc. Unless anyone has any suggested amendments to the ordinance, the motion is recommend to finalize an ordinance and to bring it back to council at the next meeting.
I would so move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. May we have a roll call, please?
Councillor Bettine?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter?
Yes.
Councillor Noseworthy?
Yes.
Councillor Youssef?
Yes.
And Mayor Brookie?
Yes, thank you, Ben. With that, we'll move on to introduction of ordinances. Item 11.1, which is an ordinance granting an easement to Fast Track Communications to install underground fiber optic access communications services across a portion of city-owned property and declaring an effective date. Is there a staff member or is this city attorney?
I will take this one also, Mayor. This was an item that was actually heard by council some time ago. I don't know exactly when, but there was some time passage due to trying to finalize some details on this easement. This is to provide for fiber optic communications to a piece of property owned by the city used by Hilltop House. So I think the ordinance is ready for adoption.
Excellent. We have no further public testimony, so we just have further discussion amongst councilors and or entertain a motion.
Motion.
Anybody want to step up with a motion on that one, or?
I will make the motion to approve the attached resolution authorizing the adoption of a terminal area and study. I think I'm at the wrong place. Sorry. Someone has to go.
Hold that thought. Come back for
Yep,
about 5 minutes.
I have to go to a different.
Okay, so I'll make an motion to approve an ordinance granting an easement to Fast Track Communications to install underground fiber optic access communication services across a portion of city-owned property and declaring an effective date. And do we have an ordinance number?
Yeah, it's 2020-06.
2020-06.
I'll second.
Well stated. It's been moved and seconded. May we have a roll call, please?
Counselor?
Yes.
Counselor Youssef, did you make that second on the motion?
I did, yes.
Okay, thank you. And then Mayor Pro Tem Baxter?
Yes.
Counselor Bettine?
Yes.
Counselor Noseworthy?
Yes.
And Mayor Bricky?
Yes. Thank you, Ben. We'll move on to administrative items. 12.1 we have reviewed and approved. 12.2 is a discussion and possible action concerning the approval of a resolution authorizing the adoption of a terminal area plan study at the Durango-La Plata County Airport and authorizing submission of a revised airport layout plan to the Federal Aviation Commission or administration. That would be FAA. So can we have a presentation, Tony Vicari?
We can. Good evening, City Council. Tony Vicari, Director of Aviation at the Durango-La Plata County Airport. We'll share my screen and walk through the presentation. All right, don't be intimidated by the number of slides. We'll move through this rather quickly. Just as a brief background on tonight's item, the Terminal Area Plan Study is a planning document that the airport utilizes essentially in conjunction with the FAA and many planning exercises. Obviously, it holds value locally in terms of our development strategy at the airport, but it's also a required document that's necessary to update, as the mayor just said, the airport layout plan for the airport, which is the official development plan on record with the FAA and what allows us to submit requests for FAA grant funding for eligible projects such as development of terminal and terminal infrastructure. So that's the brief background there. I'm going to move through this relatively quickly. If there's questions along the way, please let me know. So a very brief background. We at the airport adopted a master plan in 2016. The predominance of the work occurred in 2014 and 15. And essentially what we found ourselves with is an employment forecast that wasn't consistent with the actual growth during the 5-year period between 2015 and 2020, i.e. the employment forecast in the prior master plan proved to be more aggressive than growth of passengers over that course. And hence the master plan was projecting the need for additional expansion greater than the extent that we saw borne out through actual demand. Also, the development of the preferred alternative in that plan required a significant initial investment. For those that are familiar with it, it proposed the development of terminal facilities on the east side of the airfield, which is airport owned, but currently undeveloped land on the opposite side of the runway from the current terminal infrastructure. And then most impactfully, funding sources for that proposed development were not properly identified. There was a bond issue that was put forward to La Plata County taxpayers in 2016 to consider potential investment in support of that type of development, and it was resoundingly defeated. And subsequently, the airport was left with a long-term development plan that did not have a viable funding source. So hence the desire to update a terminal area plan. The intent of that was to update our employment forecast for current realities and actuals with current growth and projected growth, leverage our existing infrastructure, leverage our 2019 land acquisition, which was referred to earlier in tonight's meeting, which is really the major domino that moved here. Acquiring additional land adjacent to the terminal facilities allowed us to re-envision development on our parcel with a sort of one of our big stumbling blocks prior, which was a landlocked status being remedied to some degree. And it allowed us to look at the implementation of an incremental development strategy that can be funded through airport revenue streams and not be reliant on any taxpayer funded. And then the ultimate deliverable is to update our airport layout plan. So the predominance of the next probably 12 to 15 slides are really just the schematics of the overall plan. The council has seen the majority of these. Last November. The preferred our options for development were brought to both the City Council and Board of County Commissioners for concurrence with a preferred alternative. That preferred alternative has not changed since. So much of this is going to be very similar. So I'll move through this relatively quickly, just on a very high level oversight. Let me know if you have questions. I think most people are probably familiar with the existing site plan of the terminal facilities. Here's a high-level proposed site plan. Bear in mind that this reflects a 20-year development period at the airport. As was mentioned earlier, the terminal area plan is segmented in a way that allows for incremental development. But on a very high level, what this does is ultimately refurbish and expand the existing terminal building itself to allow for future capacity increases, expands parking to the west of the terminal building or up on this document. And also expands our airside infrastructure as well to allow for future growth and accommodation of additional passenger traffic. Really, this is broken down into three components: landside, airside, and terminal. Landside refers primarily to parking lots and roadway infrastructure. So I'll just click through these. You can see it's broken out into various phases that allow us to develop our infrastructure as demand dictates. The first phase expands parking, augments roadways, and moves our existing rental car lot to allow for building expansion. Future subsequent phases expand additional parking areas over time, ultimately branching into our acquisition parcel, which you can see here, which includes some rental car infrastructure and ultimately long-term overflow parking as demand grows and dictates. In terms of airside options, this refers to just that infrastructure associated with our airfield and utilized by commercial traffic. Really what this shows is the expansion of our terminal apron in the teal color, as well as de-icing facilities in the orange color over time to the north of the existing apron. This is a schematic of the existing floor plan of the terminal. Most are probably fairly familiar with it. There's a chart with a lot of numbers and statistics here. Really what it shows is that the existing building is undersized for today's demand. And as we continue to see incremental growth, it will continue to fall behind in terms of square footage and other amenities of the existing terminal. So the preferred option for development of the terminal itself, you can see here on this existing drawing. This was reviewed by the council, as was previously referenced back last fall. It allows for a recentering of the building with the TSA screening checkpoint being moved to new infrastructure outside the existing building shell, creating a new center of the building effectively, allowing for a movement of baggage claim and a total reset of our concourse while still maximizing and leveraging the existing infrastructure of the terminal itself. That's broken down into various phases of development, shown here with phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and then ultimately getting into the fourth potential phase of development. Once again, noting that these are 20 plus years of development down the road based on current employment growth forecasts. It's a programming chart just showing what each phase accomplishes in terms of key metrics as it relates to gates, concourse square footage, security, baggage carousels, etc., and comparing it against the program number, which is derived from forecasting in terms of passenger growth. So no major takeaways here other than to show that each phase is designed to try to hit the program number for the anticipated number of passengers in any given year of development. Phases 4B and 4C are just future options showing that the ultimate development does have flexibility over time to adhere to a number of different potential drivers of growth in our market and adaptations of the airlines and fleet mixes, etc. Construction phasing, I won't spend too much time on. And eligibility diagrams, just a high level takeaway here is that these are sort of shaded in a sense of showing the areas that would be intended to be covered in various phases of development, but also to show potential eligibility for said areas for funding sources. So the airport has access to a variety of funding sources for terminal development, which include airport unrestricted cash reserves, FAA, AIP grant funding, state grant funding, passenger facility charges, and rental car surcharges as well. So these are designed to break some of these spaces apart into different areas and dictate some of the funding eligibility, which we'll show in some percentages and hard numbers as we go through the presentation. So the money slide here, as it were, ultimately bears down to overall project costs. There's a lot of rows here. I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. These are broken down into specific areas of development. So the first square box up top here is the terminal itself. Second one is landside infrastructure. Third is airside. And the bottom one is the total of all phases. So just looking strictly at the total of all phases, you can see that the first phase of development, which is very high level, originally proposed for the year 2024, has existing year rough order of magnitude costs in the line of about $28 million, with about 74% of that being eligible for AIP grant funding, which is Federal Aviation Administration grant funding. An equivalent percentage is also eligible for passenger facility charge funding, and a small percentage is eligible for some rental car surcharges as well. On that front, you can see the proposed costs of future phases of development continue to go up. And one of the main things of note here, and I'll talk about it a little more in a minute, is that one of the real advantages of this particular plan is it's very much incremental. Each of these phases have options on the way that can be parceled out and broken in as needed and demand dictate. So just doing a high level comparison between the prior master plan and the current terminal area plan that's proposed today for approval. The initial investment required in the prior plan was approximately $87 million in 2020 adjusted inflation dollars, whereas the current proposed project's level of investment is slated at approximately $28 million. The square footage gain is different between these two projects. The current terminal area plan phase 1 is a slightly smaller projected build out for a variety of reasons, but principally due to an adjustment of passenger forecasts reflecting current realities in the market. And one of the major keys here, perhaps the major key, is noting that the current terminal area plan can be scaled down significantly to as low as an $8 million terminal expansion, and potentially even lower. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But the big hamstring of the prior master plan was that it could not be significantly scaled down because it required significant build out on the eastern parcel. Basically, that is a greenfield site on the eastern side of the airfield, which required investment in a taxiway, apron, roadway, utilities, parking lots, earthwork, all mandatory before terminal work could actually begin, whereas the current plan allows for flexible project development as we go and can be scaled as demand dictates. There are very few pieces of this project that touch each other, i.e. The terminal can be renovated and expanded, while landside development such as roadways and parking lots stay static if there's not a demand for increased parking space, or vice versa. So each of them tend to be able to act independently due to the existing infrastructure and just the overall scalability of the project. And then kind of last but not least, total build out costs of the current terminal area plan, or proposed rather, is approximately $50 million less over the life of the project than the prior master plan, principally due to lack of airfield infrastructure needs, roadway, utilities, et cetera, that are already in place in the existing footprint. As part of this project, we updated our airline enplanement forecast. This was talked about last fall, but just a very brief update. Our enplanement forecast is essentially mirroring the FAA's terminal area forecast. And for our particular airfield, that is baselined at a 1.5% annualized increase in passenger traffic. It's a relatively conservative forecast, and we've outpaced that for the last few years, but obviously with current conditions due to COVID-19, this forecast will have to be revisited significantly moving forward, but it just further emphasizes the importance of us using conservative forecasting and not over projecting need and demand in this particular plan. Just as I mentioned, just kind of final wrap up here, that one of the very few new pieces of the plan since it was last seen, other than some final touches, is indeed just pushing forward a reduced phase 1. This is much in light of, as mentioned, COVID-19 and downturn in commercial aviation demand. Obviously, our industry has been heavily impacted by the current pandemic. And there could very well be questions about, what future employment forecasts look like. And so what we want to do is show that this plan still holds water, and we can put forth a much reduced initial phase one that follows the merit of the plan, allows us to continue to build incrementally in the same manner we planned originally, but allows us to make some small incremental gains. So this particular project focuses on hold room, concession, and circulation space post-security, which is one of our primary issues today, and would be a project that, using current rough order of magnitude costs, would be about an $8 million project, and would be almost 100% FAA eligible in terms of grant funding as a request locally. So just showing that the project can be broken down into very small scales, regardless of what that growth looks like in the short term and long term as well. So to wrap it all up, next steps, we're proposing that the terminal area plan be adopted in June, obviously in front of this body tonight. We're on the schedule with the Board of County Commissioners at a business meeting next week. It should be noted that the Airport Advisory Commission reviewed this very document at their May advisory meeting and voted unanimously to recommend that both the city and county elected officials adopt the terminal area plan. Should the city and county choose to adopt the plan, we would move forward with updating our airport layout plan with the FAA, which would finalize the project. And then future work for us involves updating our employment forecasts, particularly post-COVID-19 as that recovery continues, working on implementation plan, obviously putting together funding strategies with the sub-context note, as was referenced earlier, that all proposed development of this project and future terminal development is proposed to be funded through airport revenue streams on that front, whether that be, as I mentioned, airport grant funding, airport unrestricted cash reserves, or the potential possibility of discussing revenue bonding for the airport. And then ultimately we'd get into a discussion of design and construction. That original timeline, as discussed with the FAA, was proposing a construction in 2024. Obviously, that timeline will be heavily dependent on the first bullet point here under future work, which is employment updates and understanding what our world looks like as we continue to reestablish traffic post-pandemic. So that is the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Dean, you're on mute.
Thank you, Tony. That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you very much. If there's no questions this time, I can make the right motion.
Excellent.
Okay. I will make the motion to approve the attached resolution authorizing the adoption of a terminal area plan study at the Durango-La Plata County Airport and authorizing submission of a revised airport layout plan to the Federal Aviation Administration.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. I just want to make a comment that the salient features of this plan are incremental development and flexibility. And I think the Airport Commission has worked really long and hard to recover from our previously failed attempt. And this takes us into the future very responsibly with logical increments. And as Tony mentioned, there's no sales tax and no property taxes largely paid for from FAA funding and grant sources. And therefore, just an awesome investment in our community. So may you have a roll call, please?
Can I just make a quick comment?
Sure, Chris.
Just wanted to jump in and, hey, Tony, you probably deserve more accolades and commentary on that great presentation. Obviously, it's late at night and we've been here a long time, but you really did an awesome job, and thanks for your leadership and stewardship of the airport along with the board as well. I mean, we've all seen this presentation before in a study session. It was non-controversial. So just really appreciate everything that you've done, and thanks. Would love to say more, but let's get to the vote.
Thank you very much.
That brings us to the roll call.
Counselor Noseworthy?
Yes.
Counselor Youssef?
Yes.
Counselor Bettine?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter?
Yes.
And Mayor Brookie?
Yes. Thank you so much. That takes us to section 13 of our agenda, which is council reports and actions. And so I'd reach out to my fellow councilors to talk about anything that has come up in the past few days since we met last.
I'll just jump in briefly on a roll here. I already gave my update on the chamber. Really, that was the mask issue with them. And then the Parks and Rec Board had their meeting last week. They're really just kind of getting updates and on pause on some level, much like we are waiting for updates on how the city's finances are going. And relative to that, I just wanted to make a suggestion for your consideration that, I appreciate all of the detail Devin's giving us, but I'm wondering if it really needs to be in that level of detail on a weekly basis. We're really literally hearing the same information every 7 days and then asking a bunch of questions, and it's just taking a ton of time for her, I'm sure, for the staff, and everybody's still here at 10, 11 at night when they're only getting to their days in 4 days a week right now. So I'm just wondering if we could have a higher level overview maybe every week instead of the full detail, and once a month do the full detail, especially now that we can see that the revenues aren't quite as dire as we once thought.
Yeah, do we have any further discussion, or that's also a topic that we can bring up at our study session on Tuesday? Or if we have other concurrent thoughts, I'd be happy to hear them.
We can talk about it. We can talk about, sorry, go ahead, Councilor.
I agree with Chris, and I have actually spoken with Amber about it, and Amber, I think kind of what we talked about was the concept of every other week, possibly doing a high level discussion rather than every week.
So high level discussion at study sessions, looking into where we are with related to COVID. And then I think once a month in terms of financial management reporting at council. And in terms of the capital improvements program, that will be a quarterly report. And what I would like to take the temperature of council on is how far in detail. What Devin did this evening was have every single project and kind of gave the status update. Once council is comfortable with the format and the report, I feel it may be appropriate for us to touch on highlights. And then of course, post the entire report on the city's website for reference. But that would be up to what council needs to feel comfortable.
And I also have a question. Devin mentioned that she's working on condensing the reports so that they're just almost a snapshot of what is happening. Yep. So to Chris's point, perhaps when she has that updated, it'll be less time consuming as well for her and for the meetings.
Yeah, and I would just weigh in saying I absolutely agree with Councilor Bettine. I think that when we originally did this, we really wanted to get to monthly updates for the public, on our city council meetings, televised, of course. So for open and transparent, reasons to get our financial information out there in a clear way. And I still, we're still evolving. And so we have lots of study sessions on this, but as we continue to evolve and get to a point where we can get concise reporting for our public, then getting to that once a month city council meeting would be great, I think.
I'll weigh in. I concur totally, and I appreciate Amber's suggested level of detail. I find it, our goal was to be fully transparent to the public. I find as we were going through it today that it was fairly lengthy, and we might have lost a lot of the public in the detail. And for those that do have that level of sustaining interest in financial issues, they can find it on our website. And therefore it is as transparent as it possibly can be. I don't know that we need to take council and staff time in the regularity that we have to fully address it each meeting. So I like the agenda that was proposed by interim city manager Blake, if we might consider that. And if issues come up such that we feel that there are significant issues that need to be brought forward to the public, we certainly would be quick to make that happen as well. So,
The member suggested as well. I think that pace is fine.
yeah, perfect. I don't think that requires a vote. That's just a policy, just a nod, if we might, to suggest a format variance. Thank you. Any other items for
I have one. I met with the Environmental Impact Fund group today, Ellen Roberts, Bob Cole, Laura Drescher, Todd Appel, and Aaron, who I don't remember his last name, as well as Levi. And they will be putting forward a request to council to determine what our interest is in participating in this program. And staff will have to do a little bit of analysis of it for council, but we should anticipate receiving a request for that in the coming time. And it's the Environmental Impact Fund is focused on forest health on private, tribal, and state lands that impacts whether or not our communities burn up or whether or not we have good forest health, and they don't, as well as affecting our water quality. So, and given that the East Canyon fire started on private property and moved on to BLM land, it shows that working together with the federal government and working with private ownership lands and doing forest health mitigation is highly important. This also connects really well with what we're doing the Natural Lands Board wise and our fire work around our community's rim. So it'll be a great conversation. It's a lot of money, but they do have some good funding opportunities and a good mechanism for supporting that, and have shown that the avoided costs far exceed the actual cost of doing the mitigation. So just wanted to let you know that was what we were talking about today.
Thank you, Kim. Barbara, did you have some comments? And Melissa, Chris? Well, I just want to thank you, my fellow councilors, for sustaining through some really important issues, particularly our Chief of Police, Bob, addressing how far ahead of the curve we really are on a number of public safety issues, and also the significant community issue of mandatory masks moving forward through the coronavirus. Big issues, and it's brought us to this late hour. But I do have, I want to remind the public that our study session next Tuesday will begin at 4 p.m. Instead of the temporarily amended time of 3 p.m. It will be from 4 to 6 p.m. next Tuesday. I want to state a couple items for the record. The city will begin a 1-year trial for the use of Class 1 pedal-assisted electric mountain bikes at Twin Buttes beginning June 29th. Details on the city e-bike program can be found at durangogov.org/electric bikes. And you can provide feedback on the trail by emailing your comments to rec@durangogov.org. So there's a feedback loop there if you have issues with the e-bike test. Another item is on the last Wednesday of each month this summer, beginning June 24th through September 30th, you are invited to participate in the Animas City Night Bazaar from 5 to 8. You can stroll around the streets of North Main, enjoy roving musical performances and sample specials at North Main bars and restaurants. There will also be a scavenger hunt with prizes. There you have it. For more information, go to animascitynightbazaar.com. So that's an update from our public relations folks. And I just want to say I was able to participate today from about 10:30 to noon on a Zoom conference with Mountain Town 2030. That's a group that consists of resort-based economies, towns serving tourist economies throughout the Western United States. Today I was on a panel with the mayor of Missoula, Montana, and the mayor of Park City, and the mayor of Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and the mayor pro tem of Frisco, Colorado, all talking about how what unique opportunities are inherent in the COVID, in response to the COVID situation. So I was able to talk about closing Maine. It's something we've been talking about for 40 years, off and on. And finally, for a limited period of time, we're going to dip our toe into the concept of closing off Main Avenue, partially, I should say. Still traffic, you can drive down Main, but open it up for a more pedestrian-friendly environment and use that as a little bit of a test to understand how we might better use public space within our community to generate and support the economy. So that was an interesting conversation. I was pleased to hear that most other mountain towns are having a similar sales tax revelation that as we are discovering that the sales tax decrease is not as detrimental as we might have been originally anticipated. And so hopefully that with proper rolling out of reopening will allow us to sustain our economies in a quicker fashion. So with that, I do have another opportunity for public speaking on Thursday with the Durango or Downtown Colorado Inc. is talking about urban renewal authorities once again from 8:30 to 12. And I'll be on a panel with Bill Bell, who is city manager of Montrose, and Greg Caton, who's the city manager of Grand Junction, talking about how far they are into the process and what opportunities that's brought to their communities. And I'll be talking, of course, about the action we took over the past week and tonight regarding creation of our Urban Renewal Authority in Durango and what that might bring in terms of economic development and public enhancement of our spaces. With that, that's all I have for this evening. And any other things that council wants to bring forward, or can I bring this meeting to a close? Seeing none, I wish my councilors and the public and our great staff an awesome evening, and thank you and good night.